Introduction. The moment everything makes sense. Imagine standing in front of two boys on opposite ends of the world. One balances on the back of a dusty pickup truck in Afghanistan, draped in white, gripping a rifle. His eyes blue-green and blazing stare coldly into the camera. There is a fire there, terrifying, resolute, dangerous. Every inch of him screams, "Fear me, obey me, watch me." On the other side, in a quiet dorm room at Harvard, another boy laughs softly. He is kneading chocolate into brownies for his little cousins, humming under his breath. He is careful, kind, thoughtful. A boy whose hands are full of sweetness rather than steel. His world smells of cocoa and warm vanilla. He dreams of saving lives. Two boys, worlds apart. Two futures divergent as rivers flowing to separate seas. And yet, beneath the surface, beneath culture, trauma, and circumstance, they are identical. Most people never see this. They insist human behavior is a mystery, that people are unpredictable, inconsistent, irrational. That psychology is too complex to decode. But the truth is more shocking, more elegant. Human behavior is complex, but human motivation is simple. Look closely. Strip away the surface, the uniform, the textbooks, the headlines, the fears, the achievements. What remains are a handful of ancient raw needs carved into our biology by evolution: to feel safe, to belong, to be respected, to make a difference, to be understood, to be loved. These needs are invisible architectures, hidden blueprints behind every emotion, every conflict, every act of brilliance or violence. They are the secret currents beneath the surface of every life, pulsing through every choice, every word, every glance. Think about your own life. The anger you felt, the betrayals that stung, the moments of joy so intense they lifted your chest and blurred your vision. Behind each, a need whispered, unseen, for respect, for understanding, for connection. We chase careers, status, love, vengeance. But always, unconsciously, we chase the fulfillment of these core needs. Consider the boy on the truck. His actions may horrify you. His path may terrify you. And yet at the root, he is seeking the same things you seek: belonging, purpose, acknowledgement. And the Harvard boy? Same drives, same invisible pulses, expressed in a vastly different form. The shape of the actions differs. The architecture of the need is identical. By the time you finish this book, you will see these patterns everywhere. You will decode conflicts before they ignite. You will see the hidden needs beneath anger, ambition, withdrawal, and desire. You will understand the people who confuse you, frustrate you, and even hurt you. This isn't theory. This isn't sociology. It is intimate. It is personal. It is the language of the unconscious, the secret code that runs inside every one of us. It is the blueprint of human motivation. Here is the truth. Understanding others begins with understanding your own needs. You are made of the same ingredients as heroes, villains, lovers, enemies, strangers, family. The world is no longer a chaotic storm. It is a map, and you hold the compass. Welcome to the secret. Welcome to the language of the heart. Welcome to the moment everything makes sense. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Difference. The dusty wind swept across the desert, carrying with it the sharp scent of sand, sweat, and smoke. A pickup truck rattled over the uneven ground, its passengers a blur of white cloth and glinting metal. At the back, a teenage boy stood gripping a rifle, eyes as cold and piercing as shards of ice. He stared directly into the camera lens as though willing the world to fear him. Every muscle in his body spoke of purpose, of loyalty, of belonging to something greater than himself. A dangerous tribe, a dangerous ideology. Thousands of miles away, in a sunlit dorm room at Harvard, another teenager slid a tray of brownies out of the oven. Chocolate melted in his hands, the warm, sweet scent filling the room. He laughed quietly as he placed the tray on the counter for his younger cousins, imagining their delight. He dreamed of healing, of contributing, of being respected, not for fear, but for kindness. His eyes were gentle, curious, alive. On the surface, these two boys could not be more different. One is feared, one is loved, one wields violence, one wields compassion. And yet, if you could strip away their clothes, their education, their geography, their culture, their circumstances, you would find something terrifyingly familiar, something universal. They are identical. Most people never see this. Most people think that the world is a chaotic collage of human differences. That behavior is arbitrary, unpredictable, inconsistent. That to understand people is to chase ghosts in a dark maze. But that's an illusion, a smokescreen. A smokescreen. Because beneath the chaos, beneath the surface differences, human motivation is startlingly simple. The core idea, difference is an illusion. What drives the boy in the desert is the same force that drives the boy in the dorm. The need to belong, to be respected, to make a difference, to feel significance in a vast and indifferent world. Their expressions, their choices, their culture, their morality. These are just different languages through which the same ancient needs speak. Humans are addicted to the narrative of difference. We compare people superficially. One is rich, one is poor, one is violent, one is peaceful, one is ambitious, one is content. We assume that what is different on the outside must be different on the inside, but this assumption blinds us. It blinds societies, relationships, parents, leaders, and it blinds you. The truth is darker, more elegant, and far more powerful. Everyone's motives are variations on a few fundamental human needs: survival, connection, respect, love, understanding, contribution. Stripped to their core, the boy on the dusty truck and the boy at Harvard are performing the same calculus. How do I matter? How do I belong? How do I feel significant? Their paths diverge, but the fire that burns inside is the same. Deep psychological breakdown. This illusion of difference is grounded in both psychology and evolution. Humans are wired to notice surface-level disparities, because in early history, survival demanded that we distinguish friend from foe, tribe from outsider, danger from safety. But this keen perception of the superficial came at a cost. It taught us to ignore the shared architecture of human motivation. Psychologically, we rely on heuristics, mental shortcuts, to interpret behavior. When we see someone acting differently from us, the unconscious mind jumps to conclusions. They are dangerous, they are alien, they are incomprehensible. Rarely do we stop to ask, what is driving them? What need are they fulfilling right now? This is why misunderstanding is so common. We respond to behavior as if it exists in a vacuum, ignoring the internal forces that shape it. When someone acts aggressively, we call them cruel. When someone obsesses over order, we call them obsessive. When someone follows a violent ideology, we call them a monster. But monsters do not exist in the raw sense. Only humans with unmet needs and unmet fears. Real-life scenarios. Let me tell you about my nephew, Rory. Rory is a freshman at Harvard. He is polite, kind, and deeply attentive to family. He bakes brownies for his cousins, tutors his friends, and dreams of becoming a doctor. And yet the driving forces behind Rory's behavior, his need to be respected, to belong, to make a difference, mirror the boy in Afghanistan standing in the back of that dusty pickup. Rory seeks admiration from his peers. He wants to be part of a community. He wants to leave a mark. So does the boy in white. So does every human being who ever lived. The only difference is how the need is expressed, not the need itself. One chooses life. One chooses death. One chooses death. But the spark, the same unyielding desire for significance and connection, remains constant. Consider also the workplace. The coworker who hoards credit. The boss who lashes out. The friend who distances themselves. They are all chasing the same core needs. They may wrap them in anger, deception, or ambition. But underneath lies the same architecture of longing that lives in you, in me, in every human heart. Hidden insights. Here is the first hidden truth. Your judgment of others blinds you to their humanity. You think people are fundamentally different, but the illusion of difference keeps you separated, defensive, reactive. Understanding this is the first step toward clarity. Here is the second. Once you see the needs beneath behavior, you gain power. Not to control, but to understand. You can predict behavior, navigate conflict, and create connection with uncanny precision. You see not just what someone does, but why they do it, and the why is everything. And here is the third, the most unsettling insight. The monster you fear is made of the same materials as you. Rage, ambition, desire, loyalty, fear. They are ingredients of human life, not anomalies. Once you recognize this, the world becomes less terrifying, but also more responsible. You are accountable, because the same forces that drive others drive you too. Direct address to the reader. I want you to look at the people around you, even those you fear or resent. Look past the surface. Ask yourself, what need is this behavior trying to satisfy? What fear is driving this choice? You will be shocked at how often you recognize the pattern, not in the person across the table, but in yourself. This is not just intellectual exercise. It is a lens that transforms every relationship, every conflict, every interaction. It is a formula that turns chaos into clarity, strangers into readable stories, enemies into understandable humans. Mini climax. Imagine the next time someone enrages you. Instead of lashing out, imagine seeing through the fury. Imagine understanding the longing behind the action, the unmet need, the invisible architecture that drives them. You feel the fire in them, recognize it as familiar, and instead of escalating, you step into clarity. You see the boy on the truck, the boy in the dorm, and you realize you are looking at yourself in another form. This realization hits like a cinematic twist, the kind that makes you gasp and reevaluate everything. The world is not chaotic. People are not incomprehensible. You are not alone in your drives, your fears, your ambitions. Philosophical reflection. The illusion of difference is humanity's oldest lie. We have been trained to see surface disparities as fundamental, to fear those who act differently, to misjudge motives, and judge harshly. But the truth is simple. Beneath the surface, we are all made of the same fire. Every choice, every conflict, every betrayal and act of kindness flows from the same deep current, the pursuit of belonging, respect, significance, love, and understanding. When you see this, the world becomes a story. Every person a character, every behavior a signal waiting to be decoded. The illusion shatters, and in that moment, you are free. Free to understand, free to connect, free to see the world as it truly is, a theater of identical needs, expressed in infinite forms, waiting for someone with the vision to see clearly. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Chapter 2. The 30 Fundamental Human Needs. The night was quiet, too quiet. A single street lamp flickered, casting fractured shadows across the asphalt. In the dim light, a man crouched in an alley, shivering, gripping his knees. Hunger gnawed at him. Fear pressed against his chest like a weight. And yet, in the hollow of his despair, his mind clung to one thought. I need to survive. I need someone to see me. I need a chance to matter. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked a glittering skyline, a woman typed furiously at a laptop. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from anxiety. She had deadlines to meet, clients to impress, and yet beneath her perfectly composed exterior, the same drives pulsed. I need recognition. I need connection. I need to feel alive. Two people, two worlds, two lifetimes apart. And yet, unseen, unspoken, they were bound by the same invisible architecture, human needs. The core idea, needs are the invisible blueprint. Every human action, every whisper, every scream, every gesture is motivated by the fulfillment or frustration of a need. Some are obvious: physical, air, water, food, sleep. Others are relational: connection, respect, love, belonging. And yet others are aspirational, spiritual even: growth, exploration, beauty, contribution. These needs are not random. They are carved into us by evolution, honed over millennia to keep us alive, connected, and thriving. Without them, we would wither. With them, we chase the invisible, the intangible, the forces that make us human. In total, there are 30 fundamental human needs, divided into 3 essential categories. 1. Physical survival needs: air, water, food, shelter, health, safety, rest. 2. Relational connection needs: belonging, love, respect, understanding, appreciation, support, trust, intimacy, communication, security in relationships. 3. Aspirational growth and contribution needs: autonomy, adventure, mastery, purpose, contribution, creativity, play, beauty, exploration, Meaning, these 30 needs are the invisible engine behind everything we do. Every fight, every romance, every career choice, every act of generosity or cruelty can be traced back to one or more of these primal drives. Deep psychological breakdown. The human mind does not think in 30 neat categories. It does not label actions, emotions, or decisions with logical boxes. Instead, needs operate unconsciously, shaping our perceptions, decisions, and reactions before we are aware of them. Imagine a person walking down a dark street. The sound of footsteps behind them triggers an instant surge of adrenaline. Fear flares, heart pounds, and the body prepares for fight or flight. What is happening? The unconscious mind has detected a potential threat to survival, a physical need. Yet, the same brain that reacts to danger also craves relational needs. It remembers family waiting at home, the bonds that give life meaning, the love and connection that make survival worth protecting. This is the architecture of human motivation. Needs overlap, compete, and amplify one another. They can create harmony or chaos. When unmet, they fester, twisting into unconscious forces that can drive irrational, obsessive, or even destructive behavior. Take relational needs, for instance. Humans crave belonging and respect. When denied, people act out in ways that appear irrational: jealousy, manipulation, withdrawal, aggression. Yet these behaviors are not random. They are strategies of the unconscious mind attempting to restore equilibrium, to satisfy the deep need that feels threatened. Aspirational needs operate similarly. Consider someone who obsesses over work, never sleeps, and sacrifices relationships for a career. To an observer, it may seem excessive, unhealthy, or even cruel. But look deeper. The person is fulfilling growth, mastery, purpose, aspirational needs that demand expression. Deprive a human of these, and frustration, depression, or despair emerge. Real-life stories. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was a rising star in a high-powered law firm, consumed by cases and client demands. She appeared ruthless, cold, and relentless. Her colleagues whispered about her obsession with success, her perfectionism, her drive. But in private, Sarah's apartment was cluttered with sketches, journals, and half-finished paintings. She spent late nights composing music, writing letters to friends, reading philosophy. Why? Because her aspirational needs, creativity, beauty, exploration, growth were starving. The professional ruthlessness. That was survival and relational needs colliding in a high-stakes environment. Respect, recognition, belonging. Across town, Marcus lived in poverty, scraping together a life from odd jobs. He fought constantly with his neighbors, lashed out, and appeared volatile. Yet when he found a stray dog on the street, he nurtured it with a tenderness that defied his reputation. The dog was a conduit for love, connection, and purpose. Relational needs finally given voice. The lesson is clear. Behavior is never random. It is a window into needs, sometimes fulfilled, often denied, always shaping the narrative of a human life. Hidden insights. Here is a truth few realize. Unmet needs are far more powerful than met needs. A satisfied need whispers. A frustrated need shouts. Chronic neglect of physical, relational, or aspirational needs twists behavior, creating invisible patterns that can govern entire lives. Another hidden truth. External differences are almost always superficial. Rich or poor, violent or gentle, ambitious or content, these are just masks. Strip them away, and the needs remain. They are universal. They are immutable. They are the secret code of humanity. And here is a final, shocking insight. By learning to recognize these needs in yourself and others, you gain an unprecedented power. Not to control, but to predict, influence, and understand. You can see past masks, excuses, and appearances to the heart of every action. You can decode conflict before it erupts, connect deeply where others remain blind, and heal relationships that seemed impossible. Direct address to the reader. I want you to do something right now. Pause. Think about someone who frustrates or confuses you, your partner, your boss, your child, or even yourself. Strip away their identity, their history, their circumstances. Ask, what need are they fulfilling in this moment? What need is driving this choice? this behavior, this reaction. You may feel a chill, you may feel awe, you may even feel fear, because once you see through the veil, you cannot unsee it. And once you do, everything changes. You see not just the action, but the underlying architecture. You see the hunger, the longing, the pulse that drives it. You see the invisible blueprint that makes every human predictable, understandable, and, in some ways, beautiful. Mini climax. Picture it. The next argument, the next betrayal, the next disappointment. Instead of reacting, you see clearly. Instead of blaming, you understand. You feel the unmet need behind the words, the gestures, the silence, the anger, the obsession, the cruelty. They are not monsters. They are cries for fulfillment. For the first time, behavior becomes readable. Conflict becomes a language you can decode. Chaos becomes a map. And in this clarity, you are no longer at the mercy of human unpredictability. You are the observer, the interpreter, the one who sees the currents beneath the waves. This is the power of understanding needs. This is the moment where the world stops being a riddle and begins to make sense. Philosophical reflection. Humanity is not a random collection of desires, impulses, and quirks. It is a lattice of needs, invisible yet undeniable, ancient yet immediate. These 30 fundamental needs, physical, relational, aspirational, form the secret scaffolding behind every action, every thought, every emotion. To see them is to see the world with new eyes. To recognize them is to enter the secret language of human behavior. And once you do, the illusion of difference shatters. You see the hungry, the powerful, the frightened, the ambitious, the angry, the loving. Not as strangers, not as mysteries, but as humans shaped by the same pulses, seeking the same fulfillment. The boy in the alley and the woman in the penthouse are not separated by chance, geography, or culture. They are separated by circumstances, by masks, by unspoken stories. Remove those layers, and you discover the invisible architecture that unites us all. And in that discovery, the world becomes both terrifying and intimate, complex yet simple, dark yet illuminated by understanding. The map has been drawn. The blueprint is clear. And now, the journey into the secret of human behavior truly begins. Chapter 3. The Evolutionary Origin of Desire. The wind howled through the ancient forest, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the metallic tang of fear. A lone figure crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, eyes scanning the shadows. A rustle in the undergrowth, a predator or prey. Heart-pounding, breath-shallow, muscles coiled like springs. One wrong move and life could end. One correct move, and survival continued just one more day. This was humanity before cities, before culture, before morality. This was the raw calculus of desire, etched into the human brain over tens of thousands of years. And in this crucible, our needs were born, not as abstract ideas, but as survival imperatives. The core idea, desire is ancient. Every longing, every craving, every compulsion we feel today is a fossil of evolution, a blueprint etched into neurons and circuits by millennia of selection. The physical needs we take for granted, air, water, food, sleep, safety, are the most obvious, but even they are entwined with subtle psychological currents. A pang of hunger does more than drive us to eat. It shapes attention, perception, and decision-making. The smell of food triggers pleasure centers before logic intervenes. Relational needs, belonging, respect, love, are no less ancient. Humans are social creatures because survival depended on cooperation. Lone hunters, no matter how strong or cunning, rarely thrived. Bonds, loyalty, trust. These were not cultural inventions. They were survival strategies encoded in our brains. Those who could read the social signals of others, who could navigate alliances and rivalries, survived longer. Finally, aspirational needs, growth, mastery, contribution, adventure are extensions of this evolutionary logic. They appear modern, almost luxurious, but they are deeply practical. Innovation, exploration, creativity. These behaviors allowed humans to find new resources, adapt to new environments, and expand influence. The urge to grow, to explore, to leave a mark, is a drive sculpted by evolutionary pressure. At the heart of it all is a simple, terrifying truth. Pleasure and pain guide everything we do. Our unconscious mind evaluates the world in a binary calculus, safe or dangerous, rewarding or punishing, good or bad. And from these evaluations, action emerges, deep psychological breakdown. Imagine a predator lunging from the underbrush. The unconscious mind lights up like a city at midnight, processing threat signals in milliseconds. Shape, sound, smell, motion. Fear erupts before reason can intervene. This same mechanism underlies our modern desires. Pleasure signals promise survival, connection, or growth. A warm meal, a smile from a loved one, the exhilaration of mastering a skill. These signals say, this is life affirming, seek more. Pain signals the opposite. Threats, deprivation, social rejection, failure, all designed to push us away from danger or scarcity. The unconscious is a master strategist, operating continuously beneath the surface. Every decision you make, what to eat, whom to trust, when to fight, when to flee, is filtered through this ancient lens. Conscious thought often believes it is in control, rationalizing decisions. But in reality, it is responding to cues processed by the deep brain. Consider dopamine, the chemical of desire. It doesn't care about morality, ethics, or reason. It reacts to signals of potential reward, guiding behavior long before consciousness can analyze the situation. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, strengthens connections, reinforcing relational needs. Cortisol, the stress hormone, sharpens attention and primes survival behaviors. These chemicals are the language of evolutionary desire, the silent operators of motivation, real-life stories and scenarios. Take Marcus and Lila, two colleagues navigating a corporate hierarchy. Marcus is ambitious, relentless, and occasionally ruthless. Lila is cautious, meticulous, and deeply relational. To an outside observer, they seem different, opposites even, yet both are driven by the same ancient currents. Survival in a competitive environment, social bonding within their team, and the aspirational need to leave a mark on their work. Or consider a modern teenager scrolling through social media at 2 a.m. Heart racing as likes and comments flash across the screen. The behavior seems trivial, even frivolous. But stripped to its evolutionary essence, it is deeply primal, seeking recognition, social belonging, and validation. The mechanisms that once kept a hunter alert to social cues in a small tribe now drive digital engagement in a global network. Even violence can be traced to evolutionary desire. Wars, feuds, and aggression often appear senseless. Yet the unconscious mind is fulfilling survival and relational imperatives. Territory, status, and respect. The tools have changed. Rifles instead of spears, but the underlying motivations remain ancient, unyielding, and universal. Hidden insights. Here is a revelation that is easy to miss. All human behavior is a response to environment interpreted through evolutionary needs. The specific circumstances, the culture, the technology, the individual history, change the surface of behavior but not the architecture beneath. Another insight. Our modern comforts have not silenced evolutionary desires. They've only transformed their expression. Hunger is no longer often physical. It is status, achievement, attention. Fear is no longer often immediate. It is social rejection, financial insecurity, existential anxiety. Growth is no longer about survival. It is about influence, mastery, and leaving a legacy. And yet, these transformed desires obey the same ancient rules. Pleasure motivates, pain warns, and unmet needs distort behavior in predictable ways. Anxiety, obsession, aggression, longing. They are not anomalies. They are evolutionary echoes, reverberating through modern minds. Direct address to the reader. Look around you. Watch people. The barista serving coffee. The friend texting frantically. The child throwing a tantrum. The stranger on the subway. Every action, every impulse, every reaction is a coded message. A need seeking fulfillment. Now look inside your cravings, your fears, your impulses. They are not random. They are the same ancient forces sculpted over millennia, guiding your every step. Hunger for food, fear of failure, longing for approval, desire for mastery. They are the ghosts of your ancestors whispering through time, driving you forward, pulling you into action. Ask yourself, Which needs are guiding me in this moment? Which ancient imperatives am I obeying without realizing it? Mini climax. Imagine standing on the edge of understanding. You can see the unconscious currents, feel the invisible architecture beneath the chaos of life. Conflict, desire, obsession, anxiety, they are all readable. And the moment you see them clearly, the world shifts. People who seemed unpredictable, irrational, or incomprehensible suddenly make sense. You recognize the patterns, the signals, the ancient logic behind every impulse. Marcus's ambition, Leela's caution, the teenager's scrolling, the soldier's rage. They are not anomalies. They are the same patterns played out in different circumstances. It is not accidental. It is the product of an invisible hand that has shaped every neuron, every emotion, every impulse over the sweep of evolution. Physical survival, social belonging, aspirational growth. These needs are the secret scaffolding of human behavior, ancient yet immediate, primal yet universal. We live in a world of unprecedented complexity, yet our motivations remain astonishingly simple. The boy in the forest hunting for survival, and the executive navigating office politics are governed by the same impulses. The soldier, the artist, the lover, the loner, all are bound by the invisible architecture of desire. When you understand the evolutionary origin of needs, you unlock clarity. You see human behavior not as arbitrary or strange, but as a chain reaction of survival, connection, and growth imperatives, calibrated over tens of thousands of years. You see pleasure and pain as guides, the unconscious as an interpreter, and the ancient code written in every heartbeat. And in that clarity, there is power. Power to predict, to connect, to understand, to navigate the human world with insight that feels almost supernatural. The currents of desire are no longer invisible. They are illuminated, and the moment you recognize them, you step into the secret heart of humanity itself. Chapter 4. The Unconscious Mind, the Silent Interpreter. The city streets were slick with rain. Neon reflections pooling on asphalt like liquid fire. A man walked alone, footsteps echoing against empty walls. From the shadows, a figure emerged, moving with silent intent. Instinct gripped him before thought. Heart spiking, breath catching, muscles tensing. He froze, eyes darting, calculating danger. Somewhere deep inside, before consciousness could analyze, a decision was already made. Fight, flee, or freeze. This invisible calculus, this silent judgment, is the work of the unconscious mind, the hidden interpreter of every signal, every stimulus, every threat and opportunity. It is a dark and mysterious force, operating in the background, shaping every thought, emotion, and decision you make. Most people walk through life unaware of its presence, believing their actions are rational, deliberate, controlled. But the truth is far more compelling and far more unsettling. We are not in control. Not really. The core idea, your unconscious rules you. Imagine the unconscious as a shadowy counsel inside your brain, working tirelessly, evaluating, categorizing, predicting, and dictating responses. It's been honed over millennia, primed to detect safety and danger, to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Its judgments are automatic, relentless, and precise. Faster than thought, more comprehensive than reason, and utterly uncompromising. Every emotion you feel, every fear, every craving, every sudden attraction or aversion is the unconscious speaking. It is the translator of life's complexity into the language of survival. When you recoil from a stranger's gaze, when your stomach flips at the sight of a dangerous street, when joy swells in response to a compliment, this is the unconscious performing its ancient, invisible work. And it does not negotiate. It does not ask for permission. Its decisions are instantaneous, shaping your reality before your conscious mind can intervene. The deep psychological breakdown. The unconscious mind operates on pattern. It does not reason in words. It evaluates cues, facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, environmental signals. It compares these patterns to stored experiences, past encounters, cultural conditioning, and evolutionary imperatives. For example, the sound of a growl or the flash of a shadow can trigger fear even before you consciously recognize it. That same mechanism guides modern social judgments. A frown, a dismissive tone, a subtle glare? Your brain reads them as threats, often long before you interpret the situation consciously. Pleasure and pain, reward and threat are its signals, distilled from survival and honed over thousands of generations. The unconscious mind is also the wellspring of desire. A longing for connection, respect, love, and achievement does not arise from rational deliberation. It arises from deep, instinctual drives that have evolved to ensure your survival and propagation. When you crave recognition, it is because your unconscious interprets social respect as a key to safety and opportunity. When you pursue mastery, it is because growth and competence historically increase chances of survival. But here is the unsettling truth. Your unconscious often interprets the world incorrectly. It is guided by heuristics, shortcuts and biases that worked in ancient landscapes but misfire in modern contexts. A sudden loss of status might trigger panic because, in a tribal environment, it meant vulnerability. A social snub on social media triggers the same neurological alarm, even though your physical safety is not at stake. Real-life stories and scenarios. Consider Maya, a young woman walking alone through a poorly lit subway station. Her chest tightens, eyes darting to every shadow. Rationally, the platform is safe. Hundreds of commuters pass every day without incident. Yet her unconscious perceives threat. Honed from childhood stories, media warnings, and ancestral instincts, she tenses, clutches her bag, moves with caution. Every action is preemptive, designed to maximize survival. Or think about Daniel, a manager confronting a subordinate who challenges him in a meeting. His heart races, hands tighten around the table edge. Conscious thought wants to remain composed, to negotiate calmly. But the unconscious perceives a challenge to status, a social threat that might diminish his standing in the tribe. Modern corporate life is still tribal. Anger flares, adrenaline surges, and before he can reason, he responds with sharpness or defensiveness. Even the most mundane behaviors are governed by the unconscious. When you reach for a snack, when you scroll through Instagram, when you avoid someone's gaze, the unconscious is quietly deciding, evaluating, guiding, and most of the time, you have no idea. Hidden insights and surprising truths. Here is a hidden truth that most people never confront. Your unconscious does not know morality, ethics, or intention. It only knows survival, connection, and growth. It does not care if your behavior is socially acceptable or culturally praised. It cares only whether your actions meet the ancient criteria it has evolved to monitor: pleasure, threat, belonging, respect, contribution. Another unsettling insight. We often confuse unconscious signals with conscious reasoning. You may think, I'm angry because of X, but often, the anger is a projection of unmet needs, misinterpreted threats, or misfired evolutionary heuristics. Understanding this distinction is the first step toward decoding human behavior, your own and that of others. The unconscious is also remarkably predictive. Once you understand the architecture, what it values, how it reacts, the cues it responds to, you can anticipate behavior with uncanny accuracy. Social dynamics, conflict escalation, attraction, fear responses, they all follow ancient rules. Recognizing this is like seeing the strings behind a puppet show, and when you can see them, you are no longer manipulated by them. Direct address to the reader. Look into your own mind. Every irritation, every craving, every impulse that seems irrational is a message from the unconscious. You are not fully aware of the forces that drive you, and the moment you begin to recognize them, you gain power. The power to pause before reacting, the power to choose, the power to understand. Look at those around you. Friends, family, colleagues, strangers on the street. They are all puppets of the same silent interpreter. Every outburst, every act of kindness, every seemingly inexplicable behavior is informed by the same ancient calculus. Once you see this, empathy becomes possible. Once you see this, manipulation becomes visible. Once you see this, human behavior loses its mystery. Ask yourself, what is my unconscious reading right now? Which ancient signals are shaping my emotions, my decisions, my fears, my desires? And then, how do I use this awareness to navigate the world more effectively? Mini climax, picture a confrontation. Two people, once friends, now enemies. Words flare, voices rise. You watch, calm, knowing the truth invisible to both. Beneath anger, beneath accusation, beneath pride are unmet needs. Belonging, respect, understanding, safety. The unconscious minds of both are lighting up, detecting threat, calculating survival, seeking reward. Every gesture, every tone, every glance is a signal in this silent war. And then, insight strikes. One subtle acknowledgement, one recognition of the hidden need, and the conflict halts. Heart slow, muscles unclench, tension dissipates. What seemed inevitable, the fight, the escalation, the fracture, is dissolved. All because you understood the silent interpreter, the unseen judge that guides every human action. This is the power of decoding the unconscious. To see the invisible, to recognize the ancient rules, to intervene at the source rather than the surface. Philosophical reflection. The unconscious mind is the hidden theater behind the drama of life. It is ancient, dark, merciless, and beautiful. It interprets the world through the lens of survival, connection, and growth. It creates emotions, directs behavior, and interprets signals faster than consciousness can intervene. And yet, its judgments are imperfect, influenced by millennia-old heuristics that misfire in the modern world. Understanding the unconscious is not a luxury. It is a necessity. To navigate human behavior, to understand desire, fear, love, and conflict, you must see beyond the surface. You must recognize the silent interpreter, the unseen operator guiding every thought, every impulse, every emotion. Once you perceive it, the world changes. People are no longer unpredictable. Conflicts are no longer inscrutable. Desires, fears, and impulses are no longer mysterious. The unconscious is no longer an enemy or a stranger. It becomes a guide, a teacher, a map of the hidden. And when you understand the unconscious mind, you begin to understand humans, not just others, but yourself. And in that understanding lies the most profound secret of all. All behavior, no matter how chaotic it seems, is guided by logic carved by evolution, written into the deepest layers of your mind, waiting for you to see it. Chapter 5. When needs clash. Internal wars, rain drummed against the apartment window in jagged rhythms, each drop hammering like the pulse of a hidden war inside James's chest. He stood alone, staring at the city lights blurred by water, feeling the familiar tension curl and constrict around his ribs. One part of him longed for freedom, adventure, the wild unknown. The other craved the warmth, comfort, and safety of belonging. He wanted to leave, escape the suffocating office, the predictable routines. But the thought of leaving his family, the people who loved him, sent a pang of guilt that pierced sharper than any blade. Inside every human lies this battlefield. Silent, invisible, relentless. Your needs, physical, relational, aspirational, do not always align. They clash, they pull you in opposing directions. And in that conflict, the mind warps, the body hesitates, and the soul trembles. This is the shadow beneath every decision you think is irrational. Every hesitation that haunts you, every self-sabotage that leaves you asking, why did I do that to myself? The core idea. Conflicting needs drive internal chaos. The truth is simple, terrifying, and illuminating. You are always negotiating with yourself. You are a collection of needs, each evolved over millennia to ensure survival, belonging, growth, and meaning. And sometimes these needs do not agree. Imagine the need for freedom and the need for belonging as two powerful forces in your psyche. Freedom demands risk, exploration, unpredictability. Belonging demands stability, connection, conformity. When these two needs activate at once, your internal landscape becomes a battlefield. You want to pursue a career that excites you, but it may alienate friends or family. You crave intimacy, but fear the loss of autonomy. You seek adventure, but need security. Every human being experiences this collision. It is the invisible engine behind most internal suffering. Deep psychological breakdown. To understand internal conflict, we must first understand the architecture of the mind. The unconscious mind, the silent interpreter we explored in the last chapter, keeps a ledger of needs and rewards. It constantly evaluates, What actions will fulfill survival, relational, and aspirational needs? What will harm them? What feels pleasurable? What threatens pain? But when needs clash, the unconscious cannot find a single path. It sends contradictory signals to consciousness. Go, stay, stay, go. The body reacts to this tension. Heart rate spikes, stomach knots, tension gathers in the jaw and shoulders. The conscious mind may attempt rationalization, but rationality is always one step behind the war that has already begun. This is why people act irrationally, why we procrastinate, self-sabotage, or repeat destructive patterns. It is not weakness, it is not laziness. It is the manifestation of internal warfare, of needs competing for attention and dominance. The conflict is particularly potent when aspirational needs collide with relational needs. You may desire recognition, mastery, or adventure, but achieving these may isolate you, risk disapproval, or destabilize relationships. Or conversely, you may cling to comfort and belonging, sacrificing personal growth and aspiration. Every choice carries invisible costs, and the unconscious tracks them, often creating guilt, anxiety, and inner turmoil. Real-life stories and scenarios. Consider Sarah, a talented artist working in a corporate office. She dreams of painting full-time, of traveling, of creating beauty and meaning. Yet she stays in the office, tethered by the need to belong, the need for financial security, the fear of disappointing her parents. Each night she sketches in secret, longing for liberation, yet unable to cross the threshold into full freedom. Her unconscious mind is at war, sending conflicting signals that manifest as frustration, apathy, and occasional self-sabotage, procrastination, half-finished projects, and harsh self-criticism. Or take Michael, a software engineer who secretly wants adventure, to move to a foreign country and immerse himself in the unknown. But his spouse, family, and community anchor him with love and expectation. Each plan he makes is undermined by guilt, by the magnetic pull of relational belonging. His dreams remain partially realized because his needs are in direct conflict, and he cannot satisfy both simultaneously. Even the smallest decisions reflect these wars. A teenager resists parental guidance while craving their approval. An employee hesitates to pitch a revolutionary idea while fearing peer judgment. A parent struggles between career ambition and devotion to children. Every instance of indecision, of frustration, of self-punishment is the echo of internal conflict. Hidden insights and surprising truths. Here is a truth most people never recognize. Internal conflict is a form of communication. Your needs speak to each other in tension, demanding recognition. When you procrastinate, argue, or retreat, your unconscious is signaling that two forces are vying for fulfillment. Another surprising insight. Self-sabotage is often a misguided attempt at balance. When you pursue one need at the expense of another, your unconscious will create discomfort, hesitation, or failure to push back, nudging you toward equilibrium. It is not punishment. It is survival strategy, evolved over millennia to prevent catastrophic risk to life, relationships, or reputation. Conflicting needs also explain why external observation often misleads. Someone may appear indecisive, lazy, or irrational, but beneath the surface lies a complex negotiation of internal forces. Understanding this transforms judgment into empathy, confusion into insight. Direct address to the reader. Think of your own life. Where do your needs clash? When do you feel pulled in opposing directions? Perhaps you crave adventure but cling to security. Perhaps you yearn for freedom but fear isolation. Perhaps you hunger for recognition but dread disapproval. Recognizing this is the first step toward mastery. You cannot eliminate conflicting needs. They are part of being human, but you can see them, name them, and navigate them consciously. You can learn to interpret the whispers of your internal war, to negotiate with your own desires, to predict the moments when your unconscious will sabotage your conscious plans. Ask yourself, which need is speaking most loudly right now? Which is silent, but pulling beneath the surface? Which decision am I avoiding because the cost to another need is too high? Awareness of this dynamic transforms confusion into clarity. Mini-climax, the moment of self-revelation. Picture this. You stand at the crossroads of your life, the rain hammering your window like a metronome of fate. One path offers freedom, risk, the unknown. The other offers belonging, safety, the familiar warmth of community. Your body trembles. Your heart pounds. The unconscious is shouting in patterns you cannot yet name. And then, a sudden flash of insight. I am not broken. I am not irrational. I am not failing. You realize the war is not a flaw. It is the proof of your complexity. Every hesitation, every inner conflict, every pang of guilt or desire is the signal of needs negotiating, of life demanding balance. And in that recognition, something shifts. Anxiety softens. Anger subsides. You can see both paths with clarity. You understand why you want both. You understand why acting on one sacrifices the other. This is the power of decoding internal conflict. This is the moment when self-awareness transforms fear into strategy, hesitation into insight. Philosophical reflection. Internal wars are not anomalies. They are the rule. Every human mind is a battlefield where needs collide, where desire and fear, aspiration and attachment, survival and belonging wage silent war. This war shapes every choice, every hesitation, every self-sabotaging act. And yet, it is not something to defeat or eliminate. It is something to recognize, understand, and navigate. The truth is unsettling. You are not a single, unified self. You are a constellation of needs, constantly negotiating, conflicting, compromising, and struggling for expression. But this is also liberating. Once you understand the architecture of your internal war, you gain insight, empathy, and power. You can anticipate your own reactions. You can understand others with uncanny precision. You can see that what appears irrational or destructive is often just a signal from a silent negotiation you have not yet learned to decode. The human experience is not chaos. It is conflict rendered visible, emotion given shape, instinct translated into behavior. The wars inside us define our actions, our desires, and our relationships. They are the pulse of life itself, the invisible engine behind every choice, every failure, every moment of courage. And when you learn to see these internal wars, not as flaws, but as the necessary machinery of motivation, you begin to step into a new realm. A world where human behavior is not mysterious, where desire is readable, where self-sabotage is no longer a curse but a message, and where you, finally, can navigate the intricate battlefield of your mind with insight, compassion, and power. Chapter 6. The Myth of Revenge. The candle flickered in the darkened room, casting long, quivering shadows across the walls. Frank stood in the doorway, holding a photograph of a woman he once loved and lost. A photograph he had taken from her apartment, not out of malice, at least not consciously, but because something inside him screamed for recognition, for understanding. Outside, the wind slammed against the window pane as if urging him to act, to reveal, to punish. And yet, as he stared at the image, trembling, the truth began to emerge in the half-light. He did not want to hurt her. Not really. What he wanted, what every human in history who ever plotted, schemed, or acted in so-called revenge has wanted, was something deeper, something almost invisible, almost terrifying in its honesty. He wanted to be understood. The core idea, revenge is a mask. Revenge is seductive. It demands attention, promises justice, and fills the air with electricity, adrenaline, and moral clarity. On the surface, it looks like anger, like retaliation, like a simple equation. You wronged me. I hurt you back. But scratch the surface, and the narrative collapses. The outward act of hurting someone else is rarely the true motivation. Revenge is a mask, a performance, a strategy deployed by the unconscious to fulfill needs that cannot be satisfied directly. These are needs most humans fail to recognize: the need to be seen, understood, validated, or acknowledged. The need to repair an invisible wound, to make the internal visible, to communicate pain that cannot be expressed in words. Humans rarely pursue pain for its own sake. They pursue understanding through the prism of pain. They wield hurt as a tool, not as a goal. And this is the moment where most people are blind. They watch a person act, and they label them bad, vengeful, cruel, without ever seeing the need pulsing beneath the action. Deep psychological breakdown. Consider the architecture of the unconscious mind. It is constantly scanning, cataloging, and evaluating. What is my experience of the world? What is just? What is unfair? Where have my needs been ignored, denied, or violated? And when the answer arrives, I am not understood, I am unseen, I am hurt, the unconscious seeks a solution. Humans are pattern seekers, meaning makers. When one's internal need for understanding is frustrated, the mind looks for a way to force recognition. If direct communication fails, it resorts to indirect methods. Revenge in all its forms is a coercive language. If you hurt me, I will make you feel what I feel. I will make you understand my pain. This explains a disturbing paradox. The bad behavior we observe in the world, hurting others, lashing out, plotting retaliation, is not inherently malicious. It is often a desperate attempt at communication. It is someone screaming in a language the outside world cannot decode. And herein lies the power and danger of misunderstanding. If you mistake the mask for the motive, you will respond with judgment, escalation, or fear, never with comprehension. Real-life stories and scenarios. Take Frank and Sophia. Their marriage had ended in betrayal, heartbreak, and confusion. Sophia accused Frank of taking a precious painting from her apartment. She assumed revenge. She assumed malice. She assumed that Frank wanted to hurt her, to punish her for the pain of the affair. But the truth was far more human, far more tragic. Frank had lost both parents as a child. His grandmother had raised him. The painting was a link to her, a connection to the only family he had ever known. The act of taking it was not an attempt to punish Sophia. It was an attempt to preserve a fragile connection, to meet a need for attachment and understanding that had been denied for decades. When Sophia finally saw past the mask, when she understood the hidden motivation, the dynamic shifted instantly. Tears replaced anger. Compassion replaced blame. The act itself, the revenge, was no longer the story. The story was the need behind it, the human longing that had driven Frank to what looked like cruelty. Consider another scenario. A coworker spreads rumors about you after a perceived slight. The natural assumption is vindictiveness, malice, and personal attack. But if you step back and decode the behavior, it often stems from fear, insecurity, or a desperate bid for recognition. They want to be seen as competent, respected, or important. And their method of securing this is twisted by unmet needs and unconscious impulses. The harm is real, but the motivation is human, not evil. Even acts of violence on the scale of historical revenge or terrorism can often be traced back to the same pattern. A profound need for recognition, belonging, or purpose that has been denied, ignored, or threatened. Humans are not evil because they act. They are desperate to meet needs in a world that seems deaf to them. Hidden insights and surprising truths. The first insight is this: no human need is inherently violent. Needs are life force, intrinsic to survival, connection, and growth. It is only when needs are blocked, ignored, or misaligned that destructive behaviors emerge. Revenge is a symptom, not a cause. The second truth is uncomfortable. If you feel pleasure from someone else's suffering, that act is not rooted in need. True human needs are universal. They are life-affirming. Hurting others for its own sake does not fulfill a need. It is a corruption of intent, a shadow of survival instincts gone astray. The third, most powerful insight: understanding the need behind revenge gives you power. When you see the human force beneath the mask, you are no longer helpless. You are no longer helpless. You can respond strategically. You can heal. You can prevent cycles of retaliation that escalate beyond comprehension. Empathy is not weakness. It is control wielded with precision, a tool for transformation rather than destruction. Direct address to the reader. Imagine the last time someone hurt you. The betrayal, the anger, the burning desire to retaliate. Now pause, step inside the mask. Ask, what need were they trying to fulfill? Were they desperate to be understood, to be seen, to reclaim connection, respect, or identity. This does not excuse the harm. It does not condone the action, but it illuminates it. It transforms rage into comprehension, confusion into insight, chaos into clarity. When you learn this language, revenge loses its grip. The mask is peeled away. The human underneath, the one screaming silently for recognition, is revealed. You may discover that what you thought was cruelty was desperation, that what seemed evil was loneliness, that the enemy was a mirror reflecting needs you have experienced yourself. This is the dark, beautiful, and terrible truth. Understanding motives is more powerful than punishment. Mini climax, the revelation in mediation. I remember one of my mediations vividly. A man and a woman were divorced, and the woman accused her ex-husband of deliberately stealing family heirlooms. The air in the room was thick, electric, filled with suspicion and unspoken blame. Every muscle in their bodies bristled. I asked a simple question. "Frank, why did you take the painting?" The room held its breath. His voice cracked, tears welling. She had become my grandmother, too. She was all I had. Silence. The accusation evaporated. Anger melted. Sophia looked at him, eyes wide, and suddenly she understood. The revenge, the hurt, the perceived malice, it was gone. The need for connection, the need to hold on to love, lost, was all that remained. And in that revelation, 10 years of resentment dissolved in 10 minutes of raw human understanding. This is the moment when the myth of revenge shatters. The act is no longer the story, the need is. The human behind the mask is revealed. And in that revelation lies the true power, empathy, insight, and emotional liberation. Philosophical reflection. Humans are not machines, nor are they inherently cruel. We are driven by needs, survival, connection, understanding, respect, love, that manifest in imperfect ways. Revenge is the theatrical, visible shadow of these hidden universal forces. It is a language we misunderstand, a mask we misread. To decode it is to wield power, not to harm. To see the human beneath the act is to step out of the cycle of retaliation, judgment, and fear. This is the secret many fail to learn. Hurting others is rarely the goal. Understanding is, recognition is, connection is, revenge is a myth. The mask is not the face. And once you learn to see beneath it, once you grasp the human need that drives every action, you step into a world where conflict dissolves, where anger is translated, and where the hidden architecture of motivation reveals the blueprint of every behavior. In every act that seems cruel, every gesture that seems vengeful, there is a story, a human story, a need unfulfilled, a longing unmet, a silent scream for recognition. And if you can see it, hear it, and respond to it, you become not just an observer of human behavior, but a master interpreter of the hidden language that drives every heart, every mind, every life. Chapter 7. The lens of pain, trauma, and the needs it distorts. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten years. Sunlight slanted through the cracked window, cutting through motes of suspended light like fragments of memory. On the floor lay a small wooden box, its lid warped, hinges squealing as if in protest. Inside, photographs of a young girl clutched a threadbare teddy bear. Her eyes were wide, almost terrified, staring into a world she could not understand. This girl, Sophia, though you wouldn't know her yet, was learning a lesson no child should ever have to learn. The world is unpredictable, and people we love can fail us. That moment, frozen in the grain of an old photograph, would echo through her adult life. Every choice she made, every relationship she entered, every betrayal she feared, carried the invisible weight of that attic, that sunlight, that box of forgotten memories. The core idea: trauma shapes the unseen architecture of the mind. Trauma is not simply an event, it is a lens. It is the hidden prism through which a human evaluates the world. It does not merely imprint memory. It reconfigures needs, what a child craves, safety, love, attention, becomes magnified when denied, twisted when unmet, and immortalized in the unconscious. If needs are the invisible threads that guide every human behavior, trauma is the knot that tangles them. A child who is ignored learns to obsess over recognition. A child who is humiliated learns to crave respect above all else. A child who loses trust in caregivers develops a profound need for control. Trauma reshapes the architecture of the psyche, altering the hierarchy of needs so that even decades later, adults are driven not just by survival, connection, and growth, but by the unresolved echoes of a wounded past. Deep psychological breakdown. The human brain is an architect of survival. In moments of trauma, it does not pause to reason, debate, or philosophize. It responds. The amygdala lights up like a furnace, firing warnings, encoding danger signals, storing experiences as survival templates. The hippocampus archives memory, but memory itself becomes selective. What is recorded is not always accurate, but it is meaningful, weighted by emotion, urgency, and threat. From this foundation, a lifetime of need-driven behavior emerges. Consider the child who grows up in a home of constant criticism. Their internal world becomes a battleground between two irreconcilable forces, the desire for acceptance and the terror of rejection. As an adult, this internal conflict can manifest in a dozen ways: overachievement, perfectionism, fear of intimacy, sabotage, and more. The need to be loved is no longer simple. It is filtered through the trauma prism, distorted and amplified, often invisible even to the person themselves. Another critical element is projection. Adults shaped by trauma often project unmet needs onto others, interpreting neutral actions as attacks or betrayals. A spouse forgetting an anniversary may trigger a childlike memory of being overlooked. A colleague's critique may feel like the echo of parental scorn. These distortions are not failures of character. They are the brain's survival software running in overdrive. Trauma amplifies needs, reshapes priorities, and creates patterns of response that seem irrational until decoded through the lens of history, not habit. Real-life stories and scenarios. Sophia's story illustrates this vividly. As a child, she had lost both parents, her father absent, her mother gone, leaving her in the care of a grandmother who, though loving, could not fully replace what was missing. Sophia's need for connection, recognition, and safety became magnified, running like molten metal through her subconscious. Every perceived slight, every unresolved tension, every fear of abandonment became a driver for behavior she could not consciously control. As an adult, Sophia's relationships mirrored this invisible architecture. Conflicts with partners often escalated over minor misunderstandings because her internal lens magnified small acts into existential threats. She demanded reassurance not out of manipulation, but out of a deep, primal need to correct decades of early neglect. Her unconscious mind was responding, always, to the trauma-coded signals of the past. Consider another example. A young man named Liam, raised in a neighborhood where safety was a constant gamble. Every siren, every shout, every stranger on the street was coded as danger. Liam grew up hyper-vigilant, mistrustful, and fiercely independent. Yet beneath this armor was a need for belonging, a desire to connect, to be part of a community. But his lens of pain distorted the root. Trust became a risk too great. So he unconsciously sabotaged relationships to protect the core need of safety. Trauma had not eliminated his needs. It had redirected them, made them silent, and rendered them invisible until someone learned to decode the lens. Even minor childhood neglect can ripple through adulthood. A child who is routinely ignored at school, laughed at for trying to speak, or dismissed when in distress, grows up with a subconscious code. I must fight to be seen. I must prove my worth. The world is not safe, and no one will recognize me unless I demand it. These adult behaviors, overworking, perfectionism, social anxiety, or aggression, are distorted reflections of the same primal need Sophia, Liam, and millions of others carry. Hidden insights and surprising truths. The first revelation: trauma does not create new needs. It magnifies existing ones. Every human seeks safety, connection, respect, understanding, and love. Trauma does not invent needs. It reshapes the intensity, the priority, and the urgency with which they are pursued. The second truth is subtle but powerful. What appears irrational is often the most rational survival strategy ever learned. The adult mind may judge behaviors as excessive or illogical, but in the context of a traumatized childhood, these responses are finely tuned to a world of danger, neglect, or unpredictability. What seems destructive is adaptive, filtered through the lens of pain. Finally, trauma reminds us that empathy is the ultimate tool for understanding. To decode behavior shaped by early wounds, one must look beyond the action and ask, what unmet need drove this? What fear, what longing, what unresolved experience? Once you answer this, judgment falls away, replaced by comprehension and the possibility of healing. Direct address to the reader. You have lived experiences too. Perhaps they are obvious, or perhaps they are buried, invisible to even yourself. Every slight, every insecurity, every moment of self-doubt is filtered through your own lens of pain. Understanding others begins here, by recognizing that everyone acts through a lens of past experiences. That colleague, partner, child, or stranger may behave in ways that seem impossible to predict, but their unconscious is guided by the same principles. Unmet needs amplified, distorted, and acted upon. Ask yourself, the last time someone hurt you, annoyed you, or disappointed you, could it be that they were responding not to you, but to an unseen wound? It illuminates them. It gives you insight and power. Mini climax. The moment understanding breaks the cycle. I once mediated a dispute between two business partners, Julia and Marcus. Their partnership had dissolved into hostility, lawsuits, and threats. Julia accused Marcus of betrayal, while Marcus accused Julia of paranoia. Both were furious, convinced of their own righteousness. Then I asked a simple question. Marcus, what do you need from Julia right now? He paused. His jaw tightened. Then, almost whispering, I need to be seen, to be respected, to know that what I'm doing matters. Julia's eyes widened, tears forming. She had spent months believing his actions were personal attacks, when in fact, Marcus's behavior was a distorted response to early neglect in his childhood. His father had always dismissed him, undermined him, and treated his successes as trivial. Marcus had learned unconsciously to demand recognition through intensity and confrontation. The adult world was simply a stage for those ancient scripts. When Julia understood this, the atmosphere shifted. Anger gave way to compassion, mistrust to curiosity, and the cycle of blame slowed. Trauma had shaped his needs, but understanding them allowed healing, negotiation, and even a fragile peace. Philosophical reflection. Trauma is not merely a scar. It is a lens, a filter, a prism that bends every human experience. It amplifies needs, reshapes priorities, and drives behavior that often seems irrational or destructive. And yet, within this distortion lies the key to understanding. Every irrational act, every conflict, every miscommunication is guided by needs rooted in the most primal parts of the mind. To see through this lens is to step into a new dimension of empathy and insight. You begin to recognize patterns, decode silent cries for recognition, and anticipate behavior with clarity that feels almost supernatural. Pain becomes a teacher, not a curse. Misbehavior becomes a signal, not a mystery. And human beings, so complex, so contradictory, so frightening, become readable. The lens of pain reminds us that every human action, every seemingly incomprehensible choice, is a plea for life, for love, for acknowledgement. To understand that is to hold a mirror to every heart you encounter, to see the invisible knots that bind us, and to respond not with anger, but with clarity, compassion, and insight. And in that reflection, the world changes, one human at a time, one act of understanding at a time. Chapter 8. The Formula for Reading Anyone. Rain-slicked streets glistened under the neon glow, puddles reflecting a fractured city. A man leaned against a brick wall, hood drawn low, eyes scanning the passers-by with clinical precision. He didn't speak. He didn't act. Yet in the subtle curve of a shoulder, the hesitant glance, the faint tremor in a hand, he read everything. Their needs, their fears, their desires. They were written on them like invisible ink. This is the kind of clarity we all crave. The ability to see through facades, to decode what drives another human being before words are spoken, before intentions are revealed. It feels like a power reserved for spies, detectives, or psychics. But the truth is more unsettling. Anyone can learn it. The formula is there, hidden beneath every glance, every hesitation, every emotional flicker. Once you know it, nothing about human behavior remains secret. The core idea, reading humans as systems of needs. Every human behavior is a signal. The laughter, the silence, the angry slam of a door. All of it is a coded message from unmet needs. Some are obvious, a child crying for food, a partner yelling for attention. Others are subtle, a smile masking insecurity, a compliment hiding envy, a pause loaded with judgment. The formula for reading anyone is deceptively simple. Identify the unmet need, then map it to the behavior. That is the hidden architecture of all human action. Every conflict, every act of generosity, every burst of rage is the unconscious mind trying to get something it cannot yet name. Respect, love, understanding, freedom, or security. Here is the terrifying beauty of it. Once you understand these patterns, you see everyone, family, friends, colleagues, strangers, even enemies, as predictable yet profoundly human. Not in a cold, calculating way, but in a deeply intimate, almost invasive way. You see the currents beneath the waves, the pulse behind the face, the invisible strings that tug at every action. Psychological breakdown, signals, needs, and patterns. The human unconscious is a silent interpreter. It translates experiences, threats, and desires into emotions, gestures, and micro-expressions before the conscious mind can even intervene. Reading someone is about tuning into this language. The body speaks first. The tightening of a jaw, the slight withdrawal of a shoulder, the flutter of pupils. The voice speaks next. The hesitation, the rise or fall in tone, the careful choice of words. Finally, behavior speaks. Avoidance, aggression, overcompensation, generosity. Every signal is linked to a need. Here's how. Fear or defensiveness often points to unmet safety or security needs. Anger or criticism can mask the need for respect or understanding. Excessive attention-seeking often hides deep relational deprivation. Love, connection, belonging. Perfectionism or overachievement frequently reflects internalized pressure, amplified by early neglect or trauma. The key is context. A single gesture may be meaningless in isolation, but patterns reveal motives. A partner who consistently interrupts may not be rude. They may be unconsciously asserting their need for recognition. A colleague who over-explains may not lack competence. They may crave validation for their competence, compensating for past disregard. The unconscious speaks in signals, but the conscious mind interprets them through the lens of assumptions. Most people read behavior superficially, mistaking the surface for the motive. To truly understand, you must invert your perspective. Look for the need beneath the act, not the act itself. Real-life scenario. Decoding hidden needs. I once mediated a dispute between two siblings, Emily and Jordan, over their aging mother's care. Emily accused Jordan of apathy. Jordan accused Emily of micromanaging. Both were furious. Both were convinced of their own morality. The room vibrated with tension, the air thick as if every word were a threat. I paused and asked them both a simple question. What do you want from each other? Emily's voice trembled. I want him to care, to show he loves her like I do. Jordan exhaled sharply. I just want her safe. I want her to trust me, to know I'm capable. Beneath the argument, beneath the resentment, was a shared need, connection and assurance. Emily's anger stemmed from fear of abandonment. Jordan's defensiveness stemmed from insecurity and the need for trust. Both acted destructively, yet their behaviors were intelligible once decoded through the lens of human need. By mapping the signals to unmet needs, understanding emerged where only conflict had existed. Step-by-step system. How to read anyone. The formula is simple, but practice is relentless. Here's a step-by-step breakdown. 1. Observe the signals, watch micro-expressions, gestures, posture, and tone. A subtle twitch, an abrupt pause, or a glance away can be the first clue. Humans cannot hide their needs completely. The body leaks them constantly. 2. Identify the emotion. Is the person anxious, defensive, joyful, resentful? Emotions are raw outputs of unmet need. Anxiety points to uncertainty or lack of safety. Frustration points to thwarted respect. Sadness often signals loss or isolation. 3. Map emotion to need. Each emotion correlates with one or more unmet needs: safety, belonging, respect, understanding, love, or contribution. Start by asking yourself, if this person could have one thing right now, what would it be? 4. Look for patterns, not isolated. Acts. A single expression may be noise. Observe repeated behaviors and emotional cues over time. Patterns reveal priorities. The sibling who always criticizes may deeply crave acknowledgement. The friend who disappears under stress may be trying to preserve autonomy. 5. Test your hypothesis. You cannot know for certain until you interact. Ask open questions, listen deeply, watch reactions. Adjust your reading as new data emerges. 6. Respond with empathy. Once you decode the need, your response shapes the outcome. Meeting the need does not mean indulging bad behavior. It means recognizing the human beneath the act, acknowledging the unmet need, and addressing it constructively. Hidden insights. Why this changes everything. Here's the dark, unsettling insight. Everyone is predictable once you understand the hidden architecture of their mind. Not in a manipulative sense, but in an unflinching, almost invasive clarity. A manager who seems mercurial. A partner who seems cruel. A friend who seems distant. They are all operating from unmet needs, amplified by trauma, habit, or circumstance. Even more surprising, people often act in ways that harm themselves to meet needs. Self-sabotage, procrastination, avoidance. All are distortions of the mind's attempt to get what it wants. Reading someone requires seeing both the external act and the internal hunger that drives it. And the ultimate truth, the more you understand, the more human you become. Decoding needs is not about control. It is about empathy, connection, and influence built on comprehension rather than coercion. Once you see the patterns, relationships shift. Conflicts dissolve, trust deepens, people feel seen, not judged. Direct address to the reader. You can do this. You are capable of seeing the hidden structures in every interaction, of perceiving the silent currents that guide behavior. Begin small. Observe a friend, a sibling, a partner. Look beyond the words. Ask, what is this person seeking? What need is unsatisfied? Your challenge, and your privilege, is to interpret without judgment, to map needs without bias, to see the hidden human beneath every action. When you can do this consistently, you begin to inhabit a new world. You walk streets filled with signals, conversations alive with hidden meaning. Nothing remains opaque. Everything becomes readable. Mini-climax, the revelation of invisible patterns. One evening, I sat in a quiet cafe, watching a couple across the room. They argued softly, words clipped, tension in their shoulders. The man's hands trembled slightly. The woman's eyes flicked away before returning, guarded and sharp. I traced the signals: anxiety, defensiveness, subtle anger. The woman, I realized, craved understanding. The man, respect. Their conflict was a dance choreographed by unmet needs, each response amplifying the other's unmet desire. I imagined intervening, simply naming the needs aloud. You want to be seen. You want to be respected. Just that recognition could dismantle the argument, dissolve the tension, shift the course of their night. It was a visceral, almost mystical reminder. Behavior is never random. Needs are predictable. Signals are readable. The unconscious is an open book if you know the language. Philosophical reflection. The formula for reading anyone is not magic. It is anatomy. It is evolution. It is the dark, intricate architecture of human motivation made visible. To decode needs is to step into the mind's shadows, to see what is hidden yet driving everything. And once you step inside that shadow, you cannot leave unchanged. You begin to see deception not as manipulation, but as a plea for unmet needs. You see cruelty not as evil, but as distorted survival. You see conflict not as chaos, but as misaligned signals of what humans hunger for most: connection, respect, understanding, love. This is power. The power to read anyone, the power to understand deeply, the power to transform relationships and interactions at the level of fundamental human need. But it is also a responsibility. To see clearly is to act wisely, ethically, and with empathy. The city streets continue to gleam under rain and neon. The humans around you? Unknown, familiar, friend, stranger, adversary? Move like currents, each guided by invisible strings of desire, each signaling, each pleading, each responding. You have learned the language. You have learned the formula. The world once opaque is now readable. And with that understanding comes clarity, compassion, and the terrifying beauty of truly knowing another human being. Chapter 9. The Story in Every Conflict. The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light overhead, casting harsh lines across the faces of two men frozen in a standoff. One finger tapped the table with deliberate aggression, the other hand curled into a fist, trembling slightly. Words had long since escalated into a staccato rhythm of accusation and defensiveness, yet beneath the shouting, beneath the rigid postures and clenched jaws, something more primal hummed in the air, something invisible. Conflict is always a story, and every story, no matter how loud or ugly, has an author, the unmet need behind the argument. Most people never see this. They see the fight, the words, the perceived injustice, and they react in kind, blind to the invisible narrative driving every gesture. But if you learn to read the story, to decode the underlying need, you stop reacting. You begin to navigate, to influence, to understand. The core idea, conflict as a language. Here's the dark truth. Humans do not fight randomly. Violence, anger, criticism, or silent withdrawal are not arbitrary. They are language, primitive yet precise. When someone yells, "You never listen," they are not only complaining, they are signaling a profound need. To be heard, to be validated, to be understood. Every conflict has a hidden storyline, a plot that repeats itself endlessly. Need unmet, emotion triggered, response misaligned. The louder the argument, the more urgent the need. The longer the tension simmers, the deeper the unresolved hunger beneath the surface. When you learn to read this narrative, conflict ceases to be a trap. It becomes a map. A story you can follow to the source of human desire, to the heart of the unmet need, to the place where resolution begins. Deep psychological breakdown. Why conflicts escalate? Conflict escalates for a simple, terrifying reason. Humans rarely fight over reality. They fight over perception. Each person is defending a story they have built in their mind about what is true, fair, and deserved. Layered atop this are primal instincts, the unconscious judgments of safety, belonging, respect, and recognition. When needs clash, a spark ignites. Fear of vulnerability, admitting a need exposes weakness. Humans hide these weaknesses aggressively, often lashing out to protect the fragile interior self. Misaligned signals. One person's attempt at expressing a need may appear threatening or dismissive to the other. A plea for help becomes an accusation of incompetence. A desire for closeness becomes smothering. Past trauma and patterns, unresolved wounds magnify small slights into existential threats. A forgotten slight from childhood can echo in adult arguments, making present disputes seem life or death. The emotional system in conflict is a furnace. Adrenaline fuels anger, cortisol amplifies fear, and judgment clouds empathy. Without awareness, each participant becomes a storm of needs and triggers, each act escalating the next in an endless loop. Real-life scenario, the dinner table argument. Consider a family dinner. A son criticizes his father's handling of finances. The father snaps. The mother sighs and retreats, tension radiating through the room. An observer sees a quarrel about money, responsibility, or respect. He wants acknowledgement that he is capable, that his efforts matter. The mother's need, peace and belonging. She wants connection, emotional safety, and a pause in the escalating drama. Each act in the argument is a misaligned attempt to satisfy a fundamental need. Each reaction, the snapping, the criticism, the retreat, is a signal, a plea for recognition. Only by seeing the underlying needs does the story become coherent, actionable, and human. Hidden insights. The unseen architecture of conflict. Here is the disturbing insight. Conflict is rarely about the surface issue. Most arguments you witness, office disputes, marital fights, sibling rivalries, political debates, are stories of unmet needs disguised as disagreements. The louder, more dramatic, or more hostile the behavior, the more urgent and raw the need. Anger masks fear or shame. The coworker who lashes out over a missed deadline is often afraid of incompetence being exposed. Silence masks desire for control or respect. The partner who withdraws may be silently pleading to have their boundaries recognized. Criticism masks longing for connection. The friend who constantly points out flaws may secretly crave intimacy and acknowledgement. Once you perceive these hidden truths, the world changes. Arguments are no longer chaotic explosions. They are narratives with a pattern, a logic, and a route you can follow. Direct address to the reader, decoding in real time. You can do this. You can sit in a room filled with tension and, without saying a word, trace the invisible currents. Here's how. 1. Pause and observe. Don't react immediately. Let micro-expressions, gestures, and tone reveal the current state. 2. Ask silently. What need is being voiced here? Translate the words into raw desires: safety, connection, respect, love, autonomy. 3. Look for alignment and misalignment. Who is trying to meet their need at the expense of someone else's? Where are the triggers amplifying the emotional fire? 4. Predict escalation points. If the unmet need continues to be ignored, what will happen next? This is where conflict can turn destructive: anger, withdrawal, sabotage. 5. Intervene strategically. Acknowledge the need without taking sides. Name it aloud if appropriate. I hear that you feel unheard. Let's pause and address that first. The ability to decode needs in real time transforms conflict from a battlefield into a dialogue. You stop being a participant trapped by emotion. You become a cartographer mapping the terrain of the human mind. Mini climax. The moment of clarity. I once watched two CEOs, rivals in a multi-million-dollar deal, spiral into a heated negotiation. Voices raised, tempers flared, insults exchanged. The room seemed poised to explode, and yet a single shift changed everything. One CEO leaned back, quietly acknowledged the other's frustration. I can see that you're concerned about trust here. Let's start there. The storm dissolved instantly. The anger remained, but it became manageable, understandable. The negotiation didn't end in defeat or victory. It ended in insight. Each party felt seen, recognized, understood. What had seemed like a chaotic battle was a story, now readable, now navigable. This is the power of decoding conflict. Once you see the story beneath the argument, escalation loses its grip. Rage becomes a signal. Criticism becomes a clue. Withdrawal becomes a plea. The battlefield becomes a map, philosophical reflection. Conflict as a window. Every argument, every quarrel, every confrontation is a doorway to the hidden human interior. The words and gestures are only the surface. The real drama is the collision of unmet needs. Safety clashes with freedom. Belonging clashes with autonomy. Respect clashes with vulnerability. To understand conflict is to see the invisible architecture beneath human behavior. It is to recognize that what appears irrational is often the most rational act possible in the context of a need unmet. It is to step back from chaos and recognize patterns where others see only noise. Once you can read the story in every conflict, you are no longer bound by reactive emotion. You see the plot, the motives, the invisible hands shaping each move. You gain a power almost mystical, the ability to neutralize triggers, to guide resolution, to turn hostility into understanding. Conflict is not a curse. It is a narrative. And once you know the story, once you understand the needs that drive it, you can choose how to respond, not as a pawn, but as a reader, a navigator, a quiet architect of human understanding. The next time you witness anger, criticism, or withdrawal, remember this: the story is never about the words. It is about the need beneath them. And when you see that need clearly, everything else falls into place. The world becomes intelligible. People become legible. And you, at last, understand the hidden currents that guide every human action. Chapter 10. How to understand the people who hurt you. The hallway was dark, lit only by the flicker of a failing fluorescent bulb. A door slammed somewhere down the corridor, echoing like a gunshot. Inside the room, a woman sat frozen, staring at a message glowing on her phone. Words meant to wound, to provoke, to unsettle. Words from someone she trusted, someone she loved or thought she did. Her chest tightened, her hands shook, every instinct screamed. Retaliate, lash out, defend. And yet, deep inside, a quieter, more dangerous question emerged. Why did they do this? Understanding the people who hurt you is the hardest thing a human can do. It is standing in front of fire, feeling the heat on your skin and refusing to burn. Most of us cannot do it. We are trained to react, to judge, to label the offender as villainous, toxic, irredeemable. But beneath the surface of betrayal, cruelty, or indifference lies a story, a structure, a hidden map of unmet needs. If you can see that, if you can read that, you gain power. Clarity without rage, insight without complicity. The core idea: compassion without condoning. Here is the paradox. The people who hurt you are driven by the same forces as everyone else. Fear, longing, unmet needs, survival instincts, a desperate quest to feel safe, seen, or in control. They are not angels, but they are not irredeemable demons either. They are, in the language of psychology, profoundly human. Compassion does not mean condoning. Seeing the human story behind harmful behavior is not the same as excusing cruelty. It is recognizing that behind every act of harm is a mechanism, pain meeting need, fear meeting strategy, ego meeting instinct. When you see this clearly, the world shifts. Anger still exists, betrayal still stings, but it becomes intelligible. You stop being a victim of chaos. You begin to navigate it. Deep psychological breakdown. Why people hurt others. Humans hurt others for reasons that rarely appear in the surface narrative. Consider this framework. 1. Projection of unmet needs. A person who feels unseen may attempt to dominate, criticize, or demean others to feel a temporary sense of control. The attack is a misguided attempt to satisfy their need for acknowledgement. 2. Fear masquerading as aggression. The most violent, manipulative, or hurtful behavior often originates from fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy. Anger becomes a shield. Cruelty becomes armor. 3. The echo of trauma. People repeat patterns they have learned. A parent who is dismissed may dismiss their child. A partner who experienced betrayal may betray. Their behavior is not inevitable, but it is patterned, predictable, and explainable. 4. Identity and ego defense. Humans cling to stories of who they are. Threats to their identity, real or perceived, can trigger aggression. The cruel words are often desperate attempts to reinforce a fragile sense of self. Every harmful act is a symptom, not a definition. Once you see the symptom as a message rather than a weapon, you gain perspective. You no longer react blindly. You begin to read the invisible anatomy of human action. Real-life scenario: the betrayal in the office. Imagine a coworker who takes credit for your idea. You feel rage, humiliation, helplessness. Your first instinct is retaliation, email, gossip, confrontation. But let us analyze. The coworkers need recognition and self-preservation. Perhaps they fear being overlooked or insecure in their position. Your need: respect, fairness, acknowledgement. The slight triggers a protective instinct to reclaim control. By stepping back and interpreting the hidden need, you can respond strategically. Not with blind anger, but with clarity. You may confront them directly, diplomatically, or choose to protect yourself without feeding the drama. You learn to separate behavior from intention, action from story, hidden insights, why seeing humanity matters. The hardest truth is this: understanding someone who hurts you is less about them and more about you. It is a test of mental discipline, emotional control, and insight. Humans will always be unpredictable, often cruel, sometimes reckless. But every act, no matter how dark, contains the signature of a need, an unmet desire, a story gone wrong. Some surprising truths: People who hurt often hurt themselves first. Their cruelty is a reflection of inner scarcity, pain, and fear. Recognizing the story behind harmful behavior does not make the behavior acceptable. It releases you from the illusion of chaos. Emotional clarity is a shield. The more you understand, the less reactive you become, the more power you wield in shaping outcome. Direct address to the reader. Building your armor. You are about to step into a dangerous psychological territory. People you love will fail you. People you respect will betray you. People you admire will disappoint you. And the instinct to strike back, to lash out, is powerful. But pause. Ask the question the world rarely asks. What need drove this? Consider these steps as a framework. 1. Observe without immediate judgment. See the behavior, note the emotion, but withhold the narrative your mind wants to create. 2. Identify the likely unmet need. Safety, recognition, belonging, autonomy. These are universal. Every harmful act traces back to one or more. 3. Separate need from action. The action may be harmful. The need is human. Recognizing this distinction is the first step toward wisdom. 4. Respond strategically, not impulsively. 3. Civilly protect yourself. Set boundaries. Communicate clearly. Do not feed the drama. 5. Hold space for understanding, not approval. You are not condoning the act. You are decoding the story. This distinction is your power. Once you do this, you stop being a hostage of their cruelty. You are no longer tangled in reactive loops. You become a reader of human behavior, a navigator of the dark terrain that others mistake for chaos. Mini climax, a moment of revelation. I remember a friend, Sarah, whose partner betrayed her trust repeatedly. Each betrayal tore her down, fueled anger, eroded self-worth. One night, exhausted and raw, she asked herself the question, why does he do this? The answer was not comforting. Fear, insecurity, a need to feel powerful, respected, and safe in his fractured self. Suddenly, the emotional storm did not vanish, but it became intelligible. The pain remained, but she saw the architecture of it. She understood how to set boundaries, how to protect herself, how to disengage without carrying the weight of mystery or vengeance. For the first time, she saw him fully. Not as a villain, not as a hero, but as a human being navigating his own labyrinth of need. And in that clarity, she found freedom from the chaos he had created in her life. Philosophical reflection, seeing humanity in darkness. To understand those who hurt you is to confront the darkest corners of human behavior and of your own mind. It is to acknowledge that cruelty, betrayal, and indifference are not anomalies, but expressions of unmet needs, distorted desires, and frightened instincts. Most people never reach this level of insight. They remain trapped in cycles of judgment, resentment, and retaliation. But the courageous few see the invisible strings, the motives, the architecture beneath the surface. They see not only the behavior, but the human being struggling behind it. And when you see this, something shifts, anger softens, fear diminishes, confusion fades. You are no longer a participant in the chaos. You are a reader, an observer, a strategist of human truth. You learn to navigate relationships not with blind reactivity, but with informed clarity. The people who hurt you will continue to exist, and the pain may persist, but the difference is profound. Now you understand. Now you are awake. Now, even in the presence of betrayal, cruelty, and failure, you hold a secret advantage. The ability to see humanity in the darkness, to separate need from action, and to protect your own soul without becoming lost in the story of another's pain. In understanding, you gain power. In clarity, you gain peace. And in seeing humanity, even in those who wound you, you glimpse the hidden truth of all human behavior. That beneath every action, beneath every harsh word, beneath every betrayal, beats the universal, vulnerable heart of a being seeking to survive, belong, and be seen. And in that revelation, you are free. Chapter 11. The Daughter on the Stairs. The staircase was dimly lit, the faint hum of a nightlight casting long, crooked shadows across the walls. At the top, a teenage girl sat hunched, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the floor as if it could swallow her whole. Her lips trembled, Her eyes glittered with a mix of fury and despair, and every small sound in the house seemed amplified in her mind. The creak of the old floorboards, the distant tick of the clock, the soft footsteps of a parent passing by without knowing. No one had spoken yet. There was no yelling, no obvious provocation. And yet, the atmosphere was charged, a storm contained in the small frame of a girl whose inner world had suddenly exploded. This is the scene most parents dread. And yet it is one of the clearest lessons about human behavior. Emotional intensity is not chaos. It is need made visible. The core idea. Teenagers are extremes of humanity. At first glance, teenagers can feel like alien creatures, moody, irrational, dramatic, and unpredictable. They slam doors, withdraw from family, and lash out with words meant to wound. Adults often respond with confusion, frustration, or judgment. Why can't they just behave? The truth is that teenagers are not acting irrationally. They are acting powerfully human. The intensity of their emotions, the volatility of their moods, and the apparent randomness of their behavior are all magnifications of the same core needs that drive every human being. Identity. Who am I? Where do I belong? Acceptance. Do others see me? Do they value me? Autonomy. Can I define myself, make my own choices, and be free? What changes during adolescence is amplification. The brain's reward system lights up like a storm. Sensitivity to social signals spikes. And the unconscious mind interprets every slight, every glance, every whispered word as monumental. What looks like rebellion is often the nervous system shouting the language of unmet need. Deep psychological breakdown. Understanding the emotional engine. To decode the daughter on the stairs, or any teenager, you must first understand the mechanics of the adolescent brain. 1. Identity as a central axis. During adolescence, the brain is wired to define self against the backdrop of the social world. Every insult, exclusion, or perceived judgment is processed as a threat to existence itself. A teen screaming, "You don't understand me," is not trying to antagonize. They are protecting their fragile, evolving sense of self. FESO, the hypersensitivity of belonging. Teenagers are acutely aware of social hierarchies. Peer acceptance, social status, and the perception of fairness dominate their emotional universe. A minor slight at school or home can trigger disproportionate emotional responses because the brain interprets exclusion as a danger signal. 3. Autonomy and rebellion. When a parent sets a boundary or offers advice, it may be perceived as a restriction of self-expression. Emotional outbursts are often attempts to assert independence, not to undermine authority. The more a teen feels controlled, the louder their inner storm becomes. 4. Mirror of adult behavior. Teens are exquisitely attuned to the emotional states of adults. Parents who react with anger, fear, or dismissal amplify the teenager's anxiety. Their drama is both a reflection and a magnification of the household's emotional climate. The key insight: the storm is never about the superficial trigger, the slammed door, the forgotten chore, the harsh word. It is about identity, belonging, and autonomy. Unmet, threatened, or distorted. Real-life scenario. The birthday party incident. Consider 15-year-old Maya. At her birthday party, her friends arrived late. One friend failed to bring a gift. Another laughed at a joke she didn't understand. In a matter of minutes, Maya went from excited and radiant to tearful and silent. Later, when her mother asked what had happened, Maya shouted, slammed her bedroom door, and refused to answer. From the outside, it looked like overreaction, drama, and ingratitude. But through the lens of human motivation, identity threatened, Maya felt unseen, her social persona invalidated, belonging compromised. The small acts of her friends were interpreted as exclusion, autonomy challenged. Her inability to control social dynamics created internal chaos. Understanding this, a parent can respond not with punishment, but with strategic emotional support, validating feelings, helping her articulate needs, and offering guidance without overt control. The drama remains, but its destructive potential diminishes. Hidden insights. The teenage mirror. Here is the brutal, illuminating truth. Teenagers amplify the patterns of all human behavior. If you can decode the emotional storms of a 15-year-old, you can decode any human being. Their impulses, their outbursts, and their dramatic swings are not unique. They are extreme versions of the core drives we all share. Some insights: every extreme reaction has a root need. Behind the tears, rage, or withdrawal lies a craving for safety, validation, respect, or belonging. Emotions are maps, not obstacles. The drama is a signal, not noise. Unmet needs in adolescence echo into adulthood. Patterns of insecurity, avoidance, or rebellion often persist if unaddressed, shaping the adult we become. Direct address to the reader. Reading the signals. You are now standing at the base of the stairs, staring at the daughter, or perhaps a son, or any human in the throes of emotional intensity. Here is how to read them. 1. Pause before reacting. The initial instinct is often punishment, correction, or argument. Step back. Observe the energy in the room. Notice posture, tone, gaze, and hesitation. 2. Identify the unmet need. Is this about identity, acceptance, autonomy? Ask yourself, what would this person need to feel safe or whole right now? 3. Separate action from intent. The behavior may be extreme, but the intent is always human. Recognize that the storm is a signal, not a personal attack. 4. Respond strategically. Offer validation, create space, or provide gentle guidance. Protect yourself, but do not escalate the energy. When applied consistently, these steps transform chaos into insight. You begin to see the hidden scripts behind every emotional eruption. Mini climax, a night of transformation. One night, a father watched his 13-year-old daughter, Emma, sitting silently on the stairs after a fight with her best friend. Her chest heaved with silent sobs, her eyes distant, unreachable. He felt the familiar sting of frustration and helplessness. Then he paused. He thought of the framework: identity, belonging, autonomy. He imagined her mind as a fragile architecture of need, every emotional outburst a crack forming under pressure. Instead of yelling, he said quietly, "I see you. I know you feel hurt and angry. I'm not here to fix it, but I'm here to be with you." Emma looked up, startled. The tension did not vanish, but the storm shifted. She whispered a single word: "Thanks." Later, they spoke openly. He did not solve the fight, but he read the story behind the emotion. And in that understanding, both survived the night intact. This is the secret. Reading needs transforms chaos into connection. The storm does not disappear, but it becomes navigable. Philosophical reflection. The stairs as a metaphor. The daughter on the stairs is a microcosm of life itself. Every human will sit, in one form or another, at the top of their internal staircase, vulnerable, raw, and charged with unmet needs. Some will scream, some will withdraw, some will lash out. For most people react with judgment, punishment, or avoidance. But the wise see the pattern. They understand that identity, belonging, and autonomy drive behavior. They recognize that emotional storms are signals, not threats. They hold space for the human story behind the drama. To understand teenagers is to understand all humans. Their extremes are magnifications of what we all feel in quieter ways. And when you learn to decode these patterns, you gain a profound insight. The world is not chaotic. People are not unknowable, and every outburst, every tear, every shout is a message waiting to be read. Standing at the base of the stairs, witnessing the storm without fear or judgment, you realize all human behavior is intelligible if you know the language of need. The daughter is not a mystery. She is a mirror, and in that mirror you see the truth of every heart. Chapter 12. Seeing the people you love correctly. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Outside, city lights flickered against the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the walls. In the kitchen, two figures faced each other, hands tight on the counter, eyes locked. Neither was shouting, neither was smiling, and yet the tension was palpable, a living thing curling around them, whispering threats. She had been upset over something trivial. He forgot to mention a minor obligation, a detail most would dismiss, but her face burned with frustration, and her voice trembled just enough to signal a storm. He, in turn, felt his chest tighten. anger rising from a place he didn't want to name. Words like knives were hovering over the countertop, ready to cut, ready to wound. This is the crucible of love, where human needs clash in silent, potent ways. What looks like overreaction, melodrama, or irrationality is almost never about what it appears to be. It is a signal, a pulse, a desperate communication from the deep machinery of the unconscious. The core idea. Love is a mirror of need. We all fall in love expecting warmth, connection, and stability. And yet, within those relationships, the very needs that draw us together often ignite our most intense conflicts. Belonging. Am I seen? Am I enough? Understanding. Does anyone really get me or the? Safety. Can I be myself without judgment? When these needs are threatened, even subtly, the unconscious interprets them as danger. The result is what we call a fight, a cold shoulder, a sharp word, or a storm of emotion. The behavior is dramatic. The need is primal. In essence, every fight with someone you love is a translation problem. The words are imperfect, the delivery flawed, but the meaning is always consistent. I need to be seen, understood, and valued. Deep psychological breakdown. The mechanics of emotional misreading. Why do we so often misinterpret those closest to us? Because the human mind is wired to project its own fears and unmet needs onto others. Consider these patterns. 1. Emotional hijacking. When a loved one's tone rises, the amygdala, our emotional alarm system, activates almost instantly. Even if their intention is mild, your brain can interpret it as threat. You feel attacked and respond defensively. What starts as a small signal becomes a full-blown reaction. 2. Mirror of our own needs. Often we misread complaints as attacks because they illuminate our own insecurities. If we fear inadequacy, a minor criticism triggers disproportionate guilt or anger. We are not seeing the other person. They are showing us ourselves reflected in their words. 3. Surface vs. substance. Complaints rarely exist in isolation. A spouse saying, "You never help around the house," is often not about chores. It is about connection, recognition, and respect. The unconscious mind encodes these needs as survival mechanisms, so a seemingly minor issue feels monumental. 4. Projection and shadow. Every relationship is a psychological stage. The behaviors we label as overreaction, stubbornness, or irritability are often mirrors of our own suppressed impulses. We unconsciously amplify and respond to what we refuse to see in ourselves. Real-life scenario. The forgotten anniversary. 4. Imagine a couple. Lena and Marcus. Marcus forgot their anniversary, caught up in work, dismissing the day as just a date. Lena's disappointment exploded. Not because of a calendar, but because she felt invisible, unrecognized, unloved. Marcus reacted with frustration. "It's just a date. I told you I'm busy," seen from the surface. It looked like a petty argument. But when examined through the lens of human need, Lena, her belonging and love needs were threatened. She wanted acknowledgement of her significance, of the relationship itself. Marcus, his autonomy and competence needs were threatened. He felt judged and constrained by an obligation he didn't choose. Once the deeper needs were acknowledged, the argument dissolved. Marcus didn't simply apologize. He understood her emotional landscape, and Lena didn't simply vent. She allowed him to feel human, flawed, and free. Both needs were met, and the fight lost its power. Hidden insights. The unseen anatomy of love conflicts. Here's the unsettling truth. Love magnifies unmet needs. The more intimate the relationship, the more raw the reflection of human desire and fear. Partners do not act against us. They act as signals, amplifiers, and mirrors of what our unconscious mind craves. Some hidden insights. Complaints are messages, not attacks. Behind every critical word lies a need for recognition, safety, or belonging. Triggers reveal vulnerability. If someone provokes a reaction, it exposes your own unmet needs as much as theirs. Understanding is not agreement. Seeing the emotional truth does not require condoning the action. It requires decoding its meaning. When you learn to interpret the hidden structure behind complaints, misunderstandings, and triggers, conflict loses its destructive power. You gain clarity. You gain influence. You gain peace. Direct address to the reader, seeing without absorbing. You are standing in the kitchen now. Your partner, child, or friend is expressing frustration. Perhaps it feels unfair. Perhaps it feels personal. Perhaps your body is already coiled, ready to strike or defend. Pause, breathe, observe. Ask yourself, what unmet need is being expressed here? What fear, hurt, or desire lies beneath the words? How can I witness this without absorbing the blame? The difference between misery and mastery is emotional literacy. You do not have to solve the problem immediately. You do not have to justify your feelings. You simply read the story behind the storm and respond from clarity instead of instinct. Mini climax, the night the storm broke. Consider this. A couple, Alex and Sarah, had been drifting in tension for weeks. Small complaints escalated into nightly arguments. Walls went unspoken. Resentment festered. One evening, after a particularly sharp exchange over household responsibilities, Alex did something unexpected. He stopped. He looked at Sarah, really looked, and said, "I hear you. I see how lonely and frustrated you feel. I don't want to fix it. I just want to understand." The room shifted. Sarah's face softened, tears formed, and the tight knot of anger in her chest began to unravel. The fight did not vanish, but the lens through which it was seen transformed everything. Alex had not changed her behavior. He had changed how he perceived it. That is the secret of understanding in love. You cannot control the storm, but you can change how you navigate it. You can read the people you love correctly, and in doing so, create a space where conflict becomes dialogue rather than destruction. Philosophical reflection, the shadow of love. To love is to be vulnerable, and to see those you love clearly is to confront the shadows of human need. Every complaint, every sharp word, every emotional outburst is a map of internal architecture. Fear, longing, insecurity, desire. The tragedy of most relationships is not betrayal, failure, or incompatibility. It is misreading the signals, absorbing blame where none is due, and responding from fear rather than insight. The wisdom of love is not about perfection. It is about clarity, perception, and translation. When you learn to see the people you care about through the lens of need, the petty fights fade, misunderstandings dissolve, and the heart of connection emerges unscathed. The next time your partner snaps, your child withdraws, or a friend lashes out, remember, it is not chaos. It is a message written in the only language we all understand. And if you can read that language, truly see it, you will no longer be lost in the storm. You will stand in the eye of it, calm, clear, and unshakable, seeing the people you love correctly, as they have always been, human, flawed, and deeply, achingly driven by the same needs that drive you. Chapter 13. Why Understanding Creates Peace. Rain pounded against the windows in jagged rhythms, each drop a tiny hammer striking the silence of the room. The office was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Two colleagues sat across from each other, tension stretching the air like a taut wire. Words had been exchanged, sharp and accusing, voices raised and then hushed, both aware that the storm was not about tasks or deadlines. It was about something far older, far deeper. A single sigh cut through the charged atmosphere. One of them leaned back, eyes closing for a brief second, and then spoke. Not defensively, not with argument, but with an almost imperceptible clarity. "I hear you. I understand why this matters to you." The room shifted. Something that had been heavy and immovable moments before seemed to lighten. Muscles relaxed, heart slowed. The tension didn't vanish entirely, but the storm lost its teeth. Understanding, it seemed, had done what words of debate could not, the core idea. Understanding as the antidote to conflict. Conflict is often treated as a puzzle of logic, a series of positions to be negotiated, a battlefield of argument. And yet, the truth is far simpler and far more unsettling. Arguments escalate because the unconscious perceives threat, not because facts are disputed. When you truly understand someone, when you grasp the needs, fears, and desires that underlie their behavior, you bypass the brain's threat response entirely. The amygdala, that primitive sentinel of danger, calms. Empathy floods neural pathways. signaling that safety, not danger, is present. Peace is not achieved through persuasion. It is achieved through perception, through clarity, through being seen and recognizing the humanity in others. Deep psychological breakdown: why understanding works. To understand why empathy dissolves conflict, we must peek inside the brain. Neuroscience reveals 3 critical insights. 1. Mirror neurons and emotional resonance. Your brain contains cells that fire both when you act and when you witness action. When someone expresses fear, sadness, or frustration, your mirror neurons recreate a faint echo of that state within you. Understanding, when communicated, taps into these neurons. Your recognition reassures the other brain that their emotions are safe to exist. 2. Threat versus safety signaling. Conflict triggers the limbic system. The amygdala floods the body with stress hormones. The heart races, judgment narrows. When you acknowledge another's internal state, you send a countersignal. I see you. You are not in danger with me. This is not persuasion, it is neurological pacification. 3. Cognitive reframing. Understanding recontextualizes behavior. When someone feels seen, their actions no longer need to escalate to assert importance. Complaints, criticisms, and outbursts are decoded as signals of need rather than attacks, which dissolves the cycle of defensive escalation. Empathy, in this sense, is more than feeling. It is a biochemical, neurological, and psychological tool capable of overriding instinctual hostility. Real-life scenario: the parent and the teenager. Consider a parent confronting a teenager who has just slammed the bedroom door in frustration. The obvious reaction is irritation, anger, or punishment. But what if instead the parent paused and mentally scanned for hidden needs? The teen is upset because of a perceived slight from a friend. Their identity and belonging needs are threatened, and they lash out at the nearest emotional target, the parent. A typical response might be, "You are disrespectful. That behavior is unacceptable." Yet when the parent responds differently, "I see that you're hurt. That friend's words made you feel invisible and angry, didn't they?" The effect is profound. The teen's amygdala recognizes safety. The storm of emotion begins to dissipate, and dialogue becomes possible. Conflict is neutralized not by correction or punishment, but by being understood at a primal level. Hidden insights: the power you already hold. Here is the dark cinematic truth about human interaction. Most people do not know how to be understood, and they rarely experience it. Arguments rage, relationships crumble, and wars are waged. All because the unconscious interprets unmet needs as attacks. Shuba's understanding is rare. It is an art and a weapon. It creates peace because it speaks directly to the architecture of the mind, bypassing defense mechanisms, bypassing pride, bypassing fear. Some hidden truths: seeing needs is more powerful than debating facts. Facts are inert, needs are alive. They pulse, demand, and escalate. Recognizing them stops escalation at the source. Empathy is contagious. When one person truly sees another, the mirror neurons in both brains resonate, spreading calm like a chemical contagion. Peace is active, not passive. It requires deliberate attention to psychological signals, a commitment to decoding rather than reacting. Direct address to the reader: your role in the invisible battlefield. You are entering moments of confrontation every day, even if they are subtle. The colleague who criticizes your work, the partner who sighs in frustration, the child who slams a door, the friend who snaps at a minor inconvenience. Each is a signal from the unconscious, a flare in the darkness of human need. You have a choice: react, argue, defend, escalate, or observe, interpret, and reflect. Ask yourself, what need is hidden behind this behavior? How is their limbic system signaling threat? How can my perception create a space of safety and recognition? This is not weakness. This is mastery. This is the secret power that turns chaos into calm. Mini climax: the boardroom epiphany. Picture a tense boardroom. Weeks of miscommunication have built a wall of frustration. Voices rise, accusations fly, egos clash. Then the team leader, usually known for sharp retorts, does something unexpected. She leans forward, pauses, and says, "I hear that this deadline feels impossible. I see how invested each of you are, and I understand why frustration is mounting. Let's figure out what each of us needs to succeed. The room still hums with tension, but the fight no longer feels like a battle. Arguments lose their bite. Defensive postures soften. The unconscious mind recognizes a signal of safety and collaboration. The chemical storm calms and a conversation begins. Real dialogue. This is the alchemy of understanding. It transforms hostility into cooperation, chaos into clarity, threat into connection. Philosophical reflection. The silent architecture of peace. The deepest conflicts in life are rarely about words, tasks, or tangible events. They are about unmet needs, misperceived threats, and unacknowledged emotions. To see another person clearly is to navigate the labyrinth of their unconscious mind. It is to recognize that anger is often sorrow, aggression is often fear, and resistance is often longing. Peace, then, is not a passive state. It is a skill, a perception, a deliberate act of psychological translation. Every relationship, every interaction, every human encounter carries within it the potential for violence or understanding. The choice, the power, and the responsibility lie with you. To understand is not to surrender, it is to wield clarity, empathy, and insight as a force stronger than argument, sharper than logic, and deeper than fear. The silent observer, the empathic reader of motives, holds dominion over the storms that rage in others and within themselves. And in that dominion, you will discover something startling. The world becomes less frightening, less chaotic, less cruel. Not because circumstances change, but because you see the human heart as it truly is, with all its frailty, longing, and beauty. Understanding creates peace because it bypasses the battlefield entirely. It whispers to the parts of the mind that crave recognition, calms the currents of fear, and allows the storm to settle without a single weapon drawn. This is the dark, exquisite, terrifying, and liberating secret. Seeing another's inner world clearly is the most powerful act you can commit. It does not require control. It does not demand obedience. It merely requires perception. And once you perceive, you wield a force that can transform rage into conversation, isolation into connection, and fear into trust. Chapter 14. The Blueprint for Lasting Relationships. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a single couple sitting in a shadowed corner. The hum of conversation and clinking of cups formed a soft, chaotic backdrop. They were arguing, though not loudly. The tension wasn't in raised voices, but in the subtle contractions of muscles, in the way their eyes avoided each other, in the pauses that stretched like taut wires between words. A man sighed and reached across the table, placing a hand lightly on his partner's. The touch was small, deliberate, almost invisible. But it shifted the air. Something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't reconciliation yet, but it was the opening, the doorway. One gesture, one perception of unspoken need, and a storm began to soften. This is the blueprint of lasting relationships, the invisible architecture beneath gestures, words, and promises. It is the art of seeing people's needs before they speak them. The core idea: relationships are predictable. Most people think relationships are messy, chaotic, and uncontrollable. They believe connection is a mystery, a game of chance, or a delicate magic. The truth is far darker, far simpler. Relationships are governed by human needs, and needs are predictable. When you can perceive another person's inner landscape, the desires that drive them, the fears that haunt them, the unmet needs that simmer beneath polite smiles, you gain the power to influence, nurture, and preserve connection without manipulation or coercion. It begins with awareness, noticing not only what is said, but what is left unsaid, feeling the emotional currents that ripple beneath surface interactions, anticipating needs before they erupt as complaints, arguments, or silent withdrawals. This is not empathy as sentiment. It is strategic, precise, and almost surgical. Deep psychological breakdown, the mechanics of emotional awareness. Human brains are wired to respond to connection. The limbic system seeks attachment, belonging, and validation. When unmet, these needs manifest as tension, irritability, and withdrawal. Understanding these mechanics allows you to predict and respond in ways that strengthen bonds. 1. Attachment needs. Humans crave security and affirmation. Partners, friends, and family all require acknowledgement of presence and importance. Ignoring these cues, even subtly, triggers the unconscious fear of rejection. Recognizing attachment signals, hesitation, tone, or micro-expressions allows proactive reassurance. 2. Anticipatory emotional signaling. People rarely express needs directly. Instead, they hint, imply, or create scenarios that reveal what they crave. A colleague who complains about workload may need respect and validation, not sympathy. A partner who withdraws may require safety and emotional containment. Decoding these signals is a skill, ignoring them is a risk. 3. Feedback loops. Relationship dynamics are cyclical. One unmet need triggers defensive behavior, which provokes further withdrawal or attack. By recognizing the need early, you interrupt the loop, steering the interaction toward harmony rather than conflict. Relationships, in this sense, are less about love or romance and more about navigation of the hidden, unconscious architecture of human desire. Real-life scenario: the parent and the child. Consider a father observing his teenage daughter after school. She slams her bag down and retreats to her room without a word. To the casual observer, she is moody or ungrateful. To the attuned observer, she signals belonging and identity needs, masked in irritation and distance. The father does not demand explanations. He does not scold. Instead, he leaves a small note in her backpack. "I'm here if you want to talk. I know this day was hard. I understand." Hours later, the daughter emerges, her posture lighter. She shares the frustrations she had withheld. A harsh teacher, a snide comment from a friend, the anxiety of expectations. The father's awareness of her needs created space for her to be seen without judgment, reinforcing connection instead of fracturing it. This is the quiet power of anticipating needs, the blueprint at work in daily life. Hidden insights. The subtle architecture of connection. Connection precedes communication. Words matter, but the unconscious responds first to perception and gesture. When needs are recognized before they are spoken, dialogue becomes almost effortless. Patterns reveal predictability. Humans repeat behaviors when needs are unmet. Tracking emotional patterns allows you to anticipate reactions, prevent conflict, and reinforce harmony. Awareness is protection, seeing someone clearly, understanding their needs, guards against misinterpretation, resentment, and the small corrosions that destroy intimacy. Understanding relationships at this level is not sentimental. It is strategic mastery over human interaction, tempered by care rather than control. It allows you to sustain bonds even under pressure, to respond instead of react, to create lasting resonance where others see chaos. Direct address to the reader, your blueprint. You encounter people daily: family, friends, lovers, colleagues. Each carries a constellation of hidden needs: belonging, respect, safety, identity, autonomy, understanding. Your challenge is to perceive them. Your opportunity is to respond before conflict arises. Ask yourself, what need is surfacing beneath this reaction? How can I acknowledge it without judgment or control? What patterns repeat in this person's behavior? And what do they reveal about unmet needs? By framing your perception in this way, you become an architect of connection, shaping interactions before tension solidifies, steering emotional currents rather than being swept away. Mini climax: the partner's revelation. A couple sits in therapy. Weeks of unspoken resentment have built walls around them. One partner has felt unseen, the other misunderstood. Tensions flare, voices rise. Then one partner pauses, exhales, and speaks with a clarity born of observation. "I realized that when you didn't respond last night, it wasn't because you don't care. It's because you were exhausted. I understand that your need to rest is as valid as my need to feel seen." The room breathes. Years of friction, compounded in hours of therapy, suddenly collapse under the weight of acknowledgement. One perception, one recognition of need, does more than debate, lecture, or reasoning ever could. The blueprint is in action, anticipating and recognizing needs before they manifest as conflict. Connection becomes inevitable when emotional architecture is decoded and respected. Philosophical reflection. The architecture of lasting bonds. Consider the hidden geometry of human interaction. Relationships are not built on luck, passion, or even love alone. They are constructed in the invisible, silent world of unmet needs. Every gesture, every pause, every act of recognition or neglect writes into this architecture. When you perceive needs before they are voiced, you become a silent engineer, shaping interactions, preventing collapse, fostering connection. The power is subtle, almost imperceptible, but its impact is profound. Arguments dissolve before they escalate. Trust deepens without grand gestures. Intimacy flourishes in the quiet acknowledgement of existence, fear, and desire. To master relationships is to read the unseen currents of the human heart, to anticipate the tremors of unmet need, and to respond with clarity, compassion, and insight. It is a blueprint, precise yet invisible, available to anyone willing to see beyond surface behavior. And in this architecture lies the truth. Connection is not an accident. It is a design, a careful, deliberate, profoundly human art. Those who see it, understand it, and act upon it will move through the world not as victims of chaos, but as custodians of the emotional landscapes around them. Chapter 15. The responsibility of understanding. The room was quiet, almost oppressively so. Outside, rain pounded the asphalt in a relentless rhythm, drumming a chaotic cadence against the window. Inside, a man watched another pacing, his face twisted with frustration. Every word, every gesture, every nervous tick was a signal. A language written in human need. The man knew it. He saw it. Every fear, every desire, every hidden wound. He could predict the next sentence, the next movement, the escalation of tension. He could sway the argument, diffuse the anger, guide the interaction toward calm. And yet he hesitated, because understanding others gives power, and power demands responsibility. This is the truth few confront. Psychological insight is a tool that can heal, or it can harm. Every time you see the need behind a complaint, the fear beneath anger, the vulnerability beneath arrogance, you step into a space of influence. But influence without ethics is manipulation. Influence without care is cruelty. The core idea, power and understanding. To understand someone deeply is to hold a mirror to their soul, to see the hidden architecture that shapes every reaction, every choice. It is the ultimate form of connection, but it is also a form of authority. Most people flounder in relationships, unaware of what drives others, blind to subtle cues, stumbling into conflicts that could have been avoided. Those who grasp the hidden forces, the unsaid desires and fears, gain something extraordinary, the ability to shape outcomes without overt control. But here lies the moral crucible. How will you use that knowledge? Will you exploit the unseen needs for personal gain, bending people to your will like marionettes? Or will you honor them, guiding interactions with empathy, integrity, and care? Understanding without responsibility is a weapon. Understanding with responsibility is a bridge. Deep psychological breakdown, the ethics of insight. Human beings are predictably irrational, driven by needs they rarely articulate and fears they often deny. To decode these layers is to enter an ethical landscape as treacherous as it is powerful. 1. The power of anticipation. When you perceive someone's emotional state before they express it, you can influence decisions and behavior. This is neutral in itself. 2. The line between guidance and control. There is a subtle, often invisible line. Encouraging a partner to calm down, guiding a child to communicate, or helping a colleague see a solution are acts of responsible insight. Convincing, coercing, or exploiting vulnerabilities for selfish advantage crosses into manipulation. 3. Transparency and integrity. The safest path is rooted in honesty. You can understand motives, anticipate reactions, and respond thoughtfully without resorting to deceit. The goal is alignment, not dominance. 4. Respecting autonomy. Every person has the right to act according to their own needs, even imperfectly. Awareness of their inner world should never override their freedom. True mastery lies in creating space for choice, not enforcing outcomes. Understanding others is not a license for control. It is a moral contract. Every insight carries weight. Every recognition demands careful handling. Real-life scenario. The manager who saw too much. A corporate manager, Alex, noticed subtle signs of stress in his team. A nervous tap of the pen, delayed email responses, short sighs between sentences. He could trace each sign back to unmet needs, clarity, recognition, autonomy. Alex had a choice. He could leverage this insight to pressure his team, to exploit their fears for productivity. Instead, he chose a different path. He scheduled one-on-one meetings, asked thoughtful questions, acknowledged contributions, and created clear pathways for decisions. The team's output improved, not because of coercion, but because their needs were seen, respected, and anticipated. This is the subtle cinematic power of ethical understanding, the ability to influence through care, not through fear. Hidden insights, the weight of knowledge. Knowledge is gravity. Understanding someone's hidden motivations is like holding an object in orbit. It has power, momentum, and potential. Drop it carelessly and destruction follows. Handle it deliberately and it can illuminate, stabilize, and guide. Responsibility is invisible. Unlike skills or status, ethical application of insight cannot be measured externally. Only the outcomes, trust, loyalty, connection, reveal whether it was wielded wisely. Every act of perception is an intervention. Seeing a need before it is spoken is already influencing. Recognize it, act consciously, and you become a guardian. Ignore it, act selfishly, and you become a predator. The ethical dimension of understanding is rarely taught. We are trained to observe, to analyze, to predict, but not to consider the moral weight of our knowledge. And yet, without ethics, mastery of human insight becomes dark power masquerading as skill, direct address to the reader, choosing the path. Imagine the people in your life, friends, partners, colleagues, even strangers. Every hesitation, every misstep, every conflict is a reflection of unmet needs. You can see it if you choose. You can anticipate, respond, guide. Ask yourself, am I seeing this person to control them or to understand them? Will my insight bring connection or coercion? How can I honor their autonomy while still responding to their needs? The answers determine whether your influence becomes a force for healing or harm. Every moment of insight is a crossroads. Every decision a reflection of character. Mini climax, the reckoning in the family. A woman, Maria, sat in her childhood home, facing her estranged father after years of silence. She had spent decades angry, hurt, and confused. She had learned the blueprint of human motivation and now recognized his patterns: fear of failure, pride, and the desperate need to be respected even when blind to others' pain. She could lash out, demand apology, or retreat into resentment. Instead, she chose understanding. She spoke slowly, naming needs without blame. I know you wanted to protect me in your own way. I understand your fear and your pride, but I also need to be seen as my own person. The air shifted. The long-standing wall between them wavered. Neither surrendered fully, but both acknowledged hidden truths. The power of insight, when paired with responsibility, had opened a door where none seemed to exist. Philosophical reflection, the burden and gift of awareness. To understand others is to inherit a silent weight. Every insight, every recognition carries moral gravity. Knowledge of human motivation is not neutral. It is a lens, and lenses can clarify or distort, illuminate or blind. The responsibility of understanding is not optional. It is the defining quality that separates those who wield insight ethically from those who abuse it. Without care, knowledge becomes a weapon. With care, it becomes a bridge. Relationships, influence, and connection are fragile. The unconscious architecture of human needs is delicate. When you perceive it clearly, you are entrusted with the potential to heal or harm, to guide or mislead, to build or destroy. And here's the final truth. Compassion is the ultimate currency of understanding. Recognition of another's needs, tempered by respect and guided by integrity, is the force that transforms insight into power without cruelty. Every interaction, every conversation, every silent observation is an opportunity to act as a steward rather than a manipulator. Understanding humans is not a game. It is a responsibility. a weight, a challenge, a profound gift. And in mastering this responsibility, you discover something more, that the deepest measure of your character is not in how much you know about others, but in how ethically you wield what you know. Chapter 16. The World Through New Eyes. The city glowed under the twilight like a living organism. Neon reflections shimmered across puddles, the hum of electricity pulsing through asphalt veins. On the street corner, a man paused, watching people pass. A woman clutching her phone, a child gripping a father's hand, a man scowling as he shoved a stranger aside. Each movement was ordinary, mundane, but now he saw the hidden currents beneath. The world was no longer random chaos. It was a network of needs, fears, and desires, weaving together invisible strings of human motivation. This is what it feels like when you step into the lens of understanding. Suddenly, every glance, every sigh, every hesitation is a story. Every human is a code waiting to be deciphered. The core idea, seeing motives everywhere, to live through this lens is to perceive a new dimension. Life transforms from a series of accidents into a structured narrative, directed by forces you can recognize, not predictably mechanical, but fundamentally readable. That woman glancing at her phone, not distracted. She craves connection, affirmation, attention. That child holding his father's hand, not obedient. He seeks safety, guidance, belonging. That man shoving a stranger, not cruel. He is defending a wounded pride, a fragile sense of respect. Understanding humans at this level is less about psychology textbooks and more about seeing beneath the surface, feeling beneath the actions, sensing beneath the words. Life becomes a cinematic tapestry of invisible forces, shaping every choice, every gesture, every glance. Deep psychological breakdown. The architecture of perception. The human brain evolved to detect patterns. Yet most people only perceive the surface, the behavior itself. Few recognize the hidden scaffolding of motivation beneath. 1. Needs drive action. Every emotion, every decision, every impulsive act originates in unmet needs. Safety, belonging, respect, love, purpose. They are not optional, they are primal. Your unconscious mind is constantly scanning for threats to these needs, and your conscious mind reacts after the fact. 2. Predictable emotional cascades. When a need is triggered, denied, threatened, or fulfilled, emotions surge in predictable patterns. Anger, frustration, joy, relief, they are not chaotic. They are signals, a language of internal states. 3. Unconscious influence. Most humans live unaware, responding reflexively. Only the trained eye can observe the subtle signs, micro-expressions, body language, tone shifts that reveal unmet needs and hidden desires. 4. Emotional fluency. To master the world through understanding is to achieve emotional fluency. You can anticipate reactions, calibrate responses, and engage in ways that reduce conflict and deepen connection. This fluency is less a skill and more a second sight, a lens that illuminates motives where others see only shadows. Real-life scenario: the subway encounter. A young woman boarded the subway, exhausted from a day of work. Her eyes darted nervously at the crowded cars. A man nearby muttered under his breath, tapping his foot aggressively. Most passengers ignored him or avoided eye contact, sensing a potential threat. But one observer saw deeper. He noticed the man's fist clenched slightly, not in intent to harm, but tension from overwork, frustration, and the fear of invisibility. He observed the woman, her gaze flicking between the floor and the door, anxiety rooted in the same primal need for safety and acknowledgement. With a subtle gesture, the observer shifted position, opening space between them, offering a quiet nod of recognition. The tension dissipated imperceptibly. Neither the woman nor the man fully understood why they relaxed, they just did. Understanding is invisible, but its effects ripple through the world quietly. Like a stone dropped in a pond. Hidden insights, the unseen patterns. Life is a series of invisible negotiations. Every interaction, from casual greetings to intense confrontations, is influenced by the silent calculus of need and desire. Conflict is rarely about facts. People rarely argue for logic. They argue because unmet needs have been triggered, safety, respect, belonging, autonomy. Recognizing this transforms your experience of disputes. Predictive empathy is transformative. Seeing motives everywhere doesn't just prepare you. It shifts how you perceive morality, luck, and circumstance. What once seemed malicious or random now appears as misguided strategy, misaligned need, or hidden pain. Life seen through these eyes is cinematic. The mundane becomes charged with narrative, the ordinary suffused with meaning. The lens in your hands. Imagine walking through your day with this lens. People are no longer obstacles or enigmas. Every misstep, every sharp word, every withdrawn smile is readable. You understand why. Not superficially, but deeply, psychologically, emotionally. The coworker who snaps at you, a wounded need for recognition. The friend who distances themselves, a fear of rejection. The stranger who cuts in line, an unacknowledged urgency, a fragile ego seeking respect. You cannot stop the needs from existing. You cannot erase desire or fear. But you can see it, predict its trajectory, and respond with clarity instead of confusion. Life becomes a dance, a conversation. A story in which you are both participant and observer. Mini climax, the cafe revelation. In a crowded cafe, a writer sat observing unnoticed. A barista fumbled, spilling coffee, flinching under the glare of an impatient customer. Another patron snapped, words sharp as knives. Most bystanders scoffed or recoiled. The writer saw the invisible script. The barista's fear of failure. The customer's hunger for control. The patron's yearning for calm and chaos. He wrote it all down. Not in judgment, not in disdain, but in understanding. A smile spread across the barista's face when the writer caught her eye and nodded. A recognition that transcended words. The cafe, once a chaotic symphony of irritation, became harmonious. Understanding had transformed a minor disaster into a moment of connection. Here's two truths. Life is predictable, not rigid. Understanding human motivation does not remove uncertainty. People will surprise you. Life will twist and turn. But insight transforms reaction into strategy, chaos into narrative, unpredictability into anticipation. 1. Your world becomes a story, not a battlefield. Every interaction is a plot point, every emotional flare a character beat. 2. Empathy is predictive, not passive. You learn to anticipate before conflict arises, to soothe before tension peaks, to connect before isolation hardens. 3. Emotional fluency is freedom. The more you read motives, the more choices you have to act, to respond, to step back, to engage, to heal, a call to consciousness. I want you to imagine stepping onto a street tomorrow, seeing faces, gestures, interactions, as if through a lens of revelation. Every disagreement becomes a clue. Every smile becomes a map. Every silence speaks a language you can understand. But remember this. Power without empathy is danger. You are not a manipulator. You are not a puppeteer. You are an interpreter, a witness, a conscious observer of the machinery of human motivation. Every glance is a message. Every action is a signal. Every person is a world with gravity, conflict, and needs. Seeing it is liberation, but only if wielded with care. Final philosophical reflection. The gift of new vision. To see the world through new eyes is to step into a cinema directed by evolution itself. Every human is a story, every emotion a plot twist, every need a hidden character shaping the narrative. Life, in this light, is no longer chaotic, no longer incomprehensible. It is readable, navigable, profound, but vision carries weight. Insight demands responsibility. With the ability to see motives everywhere comes the ethical imperative to act consciously, to respond with empathy, to respect autonomy, and to foster understanding. The world has always been complex. People have always been unpredictable. But beneath the surface, the same needs, the same desires, the same fears run like rivers under the streets, through the rooms, across the continents. And when you learn to see them, to recognize them, to interpret them, you gain something extraordinary. The ability to live fully awake in a world that most perceive only half alive. The world through new eyes is not merely observed. It is understood, navigated, and in its darkest corners, illuminated. You do not control it. You do not dominate it. You witness it. And in witnessing, you become a part of its hidden, intricate poetry. The final truth of this journey is simple, and yet terrifyingly profound. To understand humans fully is to hold the map of their desires, the blueprint of their fears, and the key to connection in your hands. How you use it is the measure of your humanity. Conclusion. The language of the heart. In the end, to understand humans is not to memorize psychology or to master techniques. It is to see yourself in everyone, to recognize the needs you carry in the hearts of strangers, to see the frightened child inside the angry adult, to see the longing inside the silence, to see the plea for connection beneath the conflict. When you understand others at the level of needs, you stop fighting the surface. You stop assuming the worst. You stop taking everything personally. You begin to see humanity, not as chaos, but as patterns. Not as mystery, but as language. Not as unpredictable, but as beautifully consistent. You learn that beneath anger is a need for respect. Beneath withdrawal is a need for safety. Beneath rebellion is a need for identity. Beneath cruelty is a need for understanding. Beneath every behavior is the same ancient architecture. Human behavior is complex. Human motivation is simple. And now, you can see it. You can finally understand humans. And more importantly, you can finally understand yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.